Yeah, we start with citizens. That's the order. Mike's on. Okay, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the School District of Waukesha Board of Education Teaching and Learning Committee meeting for Tuesday, November 5th. We are going to start out tonight with our general business. First of all, Stacy, could you verify that the meeting has been properly posted?
Yes, it has been.
Thank you very much. At this time, we have an opportunity for citizens to speak. We do have 5 citizens that have signed up to address the Teaching and Learning Committee meeting this evening. Just a reminder to those speaking tonight, you do have 3 minutes to address this board subcommittee. We ask that you be respectful to the committee. And we also want to remind you that we will not be responding individually back to you. So at this time, we have our first speaker tonight, Jenny Rath. If you would please come forward and state your address, and we'll be ready to go. So welcome.
Hi, my name is Jenny Rath. I live at 8711 West Dallas Street in Milwaukee. I am here tonight to address the proposal regarding the reduction of elective minutes in 8th grade from 5 semesters to 3 semesters. Currently, I teach French and World Geography at Butler Middle School. I'm sure we all agree that we would like to see our students perform better on the forward exam. However, do we want to just do something, or do we want to do the right thing to address this issue? The current proposal assumes that an increase in instructional minutes in literacy will lead to better test scores. Without research backing it, this assumption seems a bit arbitrary. We could attribute our drop in test scores to many things. Maybe the drop is due to the fact that student homework is no longer included in their grades. Maybe it has something to do with our adoption of iPads 7 years ago. Perhaps the drop has to do with changes in the literacy and math curricula in the past 5 or 6 years. My point is, there are so many possible reasons that making a large-scale change without diving deeper into why the test scores are lower than we'd like seems a bit premature. In the past, the district has voiced a commitment to increasing student choice and attracting and retaining highly qualified staff. Several years ago, we abandoned the wheel system of elective offerings with the stated intention of giving students more choice. Now, just a few years later, we are going to flip-flop and give students fewer choices in their 8th grade year. To give you an idea of the significance of this change, 8th grade students would no longer be able to take a year of band, orchestra, or choir and a year of world language. They would have to choose one or the other. And what about the significant number of students who are proficient in literacy? Why limit their choices when they have already demonstrated the desired skills? This plan would also have devastating effects on staffing, with each of the 6 elective areas down 0.2 to 0.5 FTEs. These reductions would inevitably lead to cuts and/or travel between schools, an undesirable job condition that may drive many specialists away or prevent qualified individuals from choosing SDW as their employer. I ask you to consider this. Are we acting with purpose, or are we acting just to say we did something to address the problem? This plan was formulated without the opportunity for staff, parents, and community members to voice concerns or make alternative suggestions. Why don't we take the time to perform due diligence and assess the many variables that enter into student test data, as well as solicit the voices of all interested parties before making such a drastic change to the structure of our middle school program? Thank you.
Thank you. Jenny? Next this evening, Rochelle Kozelek. Welcome.
Hi, my name is Rochelle Kozelek. My address is S89W23115, King Parkway, Big Bend, Wisconsin. I am a business education teacher at Butler Middle School and have been teaching in the district since 2011. I'm here tonight to address the proposal from the 3 middle school principals regarding a reallocation of minutes for the 8th grade students, resulting in a reduction of elective time. While I commend the 3 principals for recognizing 8th grade test scores as an area for improvement, and coming up with an idea to address it, I do not believe that it's what's best for students. DPI has sent me this statement along with some of the resources I will be sharing tonight. It states, "We believe that students and people in general should be able to access prior knowledge to provide context for their learning. That said, career and technical education courses, along with other electives like foreign language, art, and music, can provide that backdrop. We know that when student engagement goes up, students stay in school and perform better because they see the relevance of their learning. That's the ultimate goal, right? As an avid school, getting students to be college and career ready is a major focus. Well, that's what CTE does. According to data from DPI, students that took multiple CTE classes had a higher graduation rate than that of their non-CTE taking peers. Also, about 70% of CTE taking students continue their education after high school, and about 20% enter right into the workforce. So if the data shows that CTE helps students so much in high school, why minimize their chances of starting down that pathway in middle school? This research brings to light the impact CTE has, stating that middle school CTE adds relevance to students' learning experiences by exposing them to real-world options and connecting academics to college and career options. We all know that student engagement is crucial. And according to this research, students across the nation have stated that choice is what engaged them the most and has been linked to increased student effort, task performance, and subsequent learning. Knowing this data, why would we want to limit their choice of elective options in 8th grade? Lastly, this research contradicts the essence of the proposal by stating that changes in instructional time do not generally increase or decrease student achievement. Middle school is a very formative time for students to explore, examine, and evaluate career pathways through their elective courses. Therefore, these opportunities should not be limited for our students. I have a lot of other resources that I haven't had time to share, but I'd be happy to share them with you all at another time. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle. Next this evening tonight, we have Sara Fortman. Hello.
I'm Sara Fortman, and I live at 717 North 65th Street in Waukesha. I am a current French teacher at Waukesha North High School, and I'm just speaking tonight to remind people that the changes at the middle school that are proposed have an effect at the high school level as well. Our district values rigor, but this change would limit the number of kids who can access that rigor. The only path to AP for any of the world language, or for French specifically, is by starting in middle school, and same for non-native Spanish speakers. Allowing only 3 elective semesters would mean that 8th graders would have to choose between taking a language or taking music, or they would be limited to having only 1 semester of another elective. And that's not a choice that I believe that they should have to take. Many of my students that I have currently are musicians and artists, as well as strong language learners. And these aren't just the type of things that you can take a year off from. So if they were to start a language in 7th grade, taking a year off in 8th grade so that they can continue with an instrument or choir or things like that would mean that they'd be jumping in their freshman year without the same continuity as they would have if they were allowed to continue taking both simultaneously through that 8th grade year. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sara. Next, Amy Brooks. Welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Amy Brooks. My address is 545 West College Avenue in Waukesha. I am the French teacher and I teach AVID ninth grade at Waukesha South High School. I appreciate the opportunity to speak and advocate for the French program in this district. As my colleague Ms. Fortman spoke on, the idea of rigor and specifically for AP French, one thing that has been very gratifying to see as an instructor is how many students have been able to earn retro credits in college. So they save a lot of time and a lot of money, and it's huge for them when they get into college because they had that experience in high school. They were able to access that rigor in high school, and then they were able to take higher level coursework in college. It's a huge motivator for students, and it is a huge benefit for families as well in our district. I have over the years written so many letters of recommendations for my seniors who are at that AP level, and it brings me a lot of pride to be able to talk about how well-rounded they are. And I think that it really shows like our district values in terms of what kind of elective programs students are able to access here and what drives students to come to school and fully engage in their coursework. So even coming and walking in through this building and noticing the banners that are posted in the halls with students who are so joyful in the pictures, engaging in a lot of what appears to be elective coursework, and knowing how that experience or those experiences enrich their daily lives in school has been huge as an educator. I think that it would be very important for us to really encourage students from even a middle school level and show them what they can do with their foreign language skills is specifically what I can talk about. And I know that my French and Spanish colleagues, we have seen so many students come through and be able to be successful in college because of the literacy skills they're learning in our classes and how we are supporting their work in their core content areas too. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Amy. Next this evening, Mary Beth Haas. Welcome, Mary Beth.
My name is Mary Beth Haas, and I am actually here as a parent of a 5th grader and 7th grade. Oh, is this on? Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. My address. 2832 Emsley Drive here in Waukesha. So I'm here as a parent of a 5th grader and a 7th grader in the district. I have been a school library media specialist for 24 years, and tonight, though, I am wearing my parent hat. I have heard that the middle school scores for the forward exam are not where we want them to be. As a parent, I am very concerned about this, but I've also heard that there's talk about adding a literacy block to 8th grade and reducing the number of electives my son would be able to take next year as an 8th grader. I am here to let you know that I am not in favor of reducing the electives. I think the electives are very valuable classes to our students in the district. I can't imagine giving up any electives for my 8th graders for an additional literacy block. This would be a disservice to him. I don't believe that adding an extra class hour of literacy onto an 8th grader schedule really gets at solving the root of the problem. I think we need to look at the curriculum and instructional practices in our district. Every year since my son was in 1st grade, it's kind of gotten to be a joke with my husband because I've gone to conferences and I've asked the teachers for a grammar curriculum, and I was told that we are most concerned with his ideas for writing, and I have been extremely worried about him learning his grammar skills. I also believe that we need to look at our homework and grading policy. My son tells me that he reads at least 30 minutes in class every day, and I just wonder why this can't be done at home. It would need to count as a graded assignment, I think, because I think that we need to hold kids accountable. We have given kids a lot of choice with their reading, and I think this can be great. However, I hear that when kids are sometimes in class, that they are sometimes fake, what we would call fake reading. And again, we need to hold kids accountable during this reading time. My fifth grader is expected to read more this year than my seventh grader each night at home. When I came to this district, we had reading specialists who pulled kids out of class and worked with them individually or in small groups. We had library media specialists serving 2 elementary schools or 1 middle school. We have reduced these important literacy positions. We had read box books with comprehension questions and vocabulary. We had a spelling program, and I thought the staff in these literacy programs were vital components for our literacy program. We have also invested a lot of money in iPads, but have we evaluated these tools to see how they have impacted the education of our students? I think we need to look at the many aspects it takes to prepare our students for college and career readiness when it comes to literacy. I don't think it's as simple as adding 1 extra hour a day of literacy onto an 8th grader schedule. I think we need to have some open, honest conversations about solutions to improving our literacy scores. And then I also, my second concern, because I have a 5th grader who is going to be a 6th grader, and at the last board meeting, I've heard this, and I'm very, what would I say? I guess I just am concerned, is that the 6th graders going into Butler are possibly going to be going to Blair next school year. I have to say I'm not in favor of this. I have recently experienced as a parent, the transition from elementary to middle school, and I learned a lot as a parent. I drive my son to school each day, and we talk for 10 minutes in the car, and I definitely could feel that he was, is that time?
Yeah, I'll just wrap it up.
Oh, can I? Okay. I guess I just have a lot of questions that if this is actually going to go into effect, we really need to have a well thought out plan. And I guess I have a lot of questions as a parent that I would like to have an avenue for those questions to be addressed. Just really think through the many, many things that are involved with this. So thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mary Beth. Anyone else in the audience, any other residents that'd like to speak to the committee this evening? Okay. Thank you very much. Next, under general business, we have a Bright Lights presentation by Bethesda Elementary School titled Osce in 5K Dual Language. And Jeremy Martin is here this evening, as well as some staff of his, to lead us in that Bright Lights presentation. So welcome, Jeremy, and your staff.
Thank you so much. My name is Jeremy Martin, proud principal of Bethesda, and tonight I'm joined here with me with 4 wonderful 5K DL dual language students that I have with me. Aylin, Selena, Kellen, and William, as well as Daisy Van Kempen and Crystal Feet, 2 5K dual language teachers at Bethesda Elementary. Today, we're going to talk about Osce in 5K, and I'm going to just speak briefly and turn the time over to the experts in the room here with our students. Osce is the ability to express oneself fluently, and those are some of the videos we sent out to our parents to kind of explain what this means. It's part of our theory of action as we analyze our data and look at how we can improve as a school. Being able to express ideas orally benefits speaking, reading, writing, and listening. And so there's a focus that at Bethesda, we're all language learners. And so we're all, the ALL, we're all Bethesda. We can all benefit from learning academic language, and we could access the curriculum better. So Osce in 5K DL. So as you see, one of our focuses this year is 100% student participation. And so some of those questions up there to reflect are really about, are all the students talking? What are they saying? And a little bit about teacher talk versus student talk, and quantity versus quality. as well as some nice quotes about oracy as well. And we talk about oral language development, how it's crucial first step in developing literacy skills, as well as students' language literacy and thinking develop as a result of academically rich conversations. And so school-wide, we have one of our focus areas in the area of oracy. So I'm going to turn the time over to our teachers and students to show what that looks like at Bethesda.
Okay, so oracy shows itself in a variety of ways. So first we have bilingual pairs, and you can see in the upper left-hand corner, we intentionally pair children with a partner. The duration is usually about a month. So we try to do home Spanish language children. We try to pair them with home English language children whenever possible. So we like to have a heterogeneous mix. So when we have those bilingual pairs, you can see in the lower left-hand corner, we have a group of bilingual pairs who are talking about a topic, and they have been given a sentence frame, so a sentence starter. So everything is contextualized. So then they practice, and there is a model on the smartboard as to what the procedure is. So partner A says this, then partner B responds, and then they switch. We also have a fun, you all think it's fun, right? You all said that was your fun. Yeah, the funnest one. Parallel lines, where there are two lines formed. One line stays in place, and the other line, children go down one until they have that. Everybody talks to everybody else in the corresponding line, so that they have a lot of ideas shared, a lot of oracy experiences. And then after all of that, we then are able to have a whole group discussion that is contextualized, and they've practiced in a variety of ways all of the topics using the sentence frames.
A very important piece in order to support this oracy piece in our classrooms are the supports and scaffolds that we're going to be providing to our students. So like Mr. Martin has mentioned, our oracy piece at Bethesda is very intentional and very focused. We are doing this oracy piece in two main moments of our instruction. The first one is the language workshop discussion, and then during math time, our numeracy routine in moment. So these supports and scaffolds we're going to show in what is this support that we're providing to our students. So for literacy, we are analyzing and talking about different texts, right? Literacy texts. So these are some samples that we're using in the classroom to support this oracy piece. Like partner A, what it's going to be saying, partner B, what it's going to be saying, and then providing pictures from the text so the kids can be focused and engaged in their conversations. So these are just some samples that we started creating last year, and this year we've been implementing with more words, more academic language so that students can practice and they can express their thoughts. Again, it's discussion with a focus. In this case, for literacy, they're analyzing different books. So I'm just going to translate. Like the first question is like, who are part of Lola's community, the character, and B says, in Lola's community is, and then the student give the answer. And then with very short answer like, I agree or I disagree. And then what is a community? A student A asks, and B, a community is, and they are sharing their ideas. So, and for math, we have the numeracy routine prompt. And this information has been collected through different PDs, trainings that we've been having in the district. Again, this is the support, like what A is going to be saying, what B is going to be saying, and then eventually we start taking away this support with the kids when they are able to reproduce without the expressions that we're presenting there. So these are just some samples that we have for the kids to get engaged, motivated, expressing their thoughts.
And so one of the key pieces here is to also transfer oracy to writing. So I think that it's now a district-wide focus on putting oracy into writing, but at Bethesda that has long been established. So as you can see from one of the thoughtfulness journals, we actually put a prompt about what do you see in the community. And the student here was able to write, I see, because that was a sentence frame, yo veo, and then what they saw in the community. And having been in the dual language education business for many years, and this is my first year in Waukesha, and I never explicitly taught Osce to writing in this way. So I've actually seen, and this is my 14th year teaching, I've actually seen the benefits of making that a focal point and making sure that the Osce piece is then transferred into writing.
And then another important piece that we're implementing at Bethesda is the measuring part. Like, how do we make sure that every student is sharing their thoughts, everyone is participating? And we have included the use of the technology. By using a simple Google form, we are tracking the students' participation, and we have for kindergarten different categories like the F4, if they are speaking something relevant, irrelevant, if they are adding new ideas, if they are building another ideas. And then the Google form allows us also to see this, to track this participation. And also there is a part of the form that has includes teachers' reflections, like what I have noticed after the students expressing their thoughts, who needs more support, who needs some more scaffolding in order to make them participate in the classroom. So this is very, very simple way to track their participation. And now we brought tonight 4 experts for you to meet. Feel welcome to ask them questions about their experience. If you...
Are there any questions for our experts?
Well, we have to come up with something, don't we?
Mr. O'Brien.
I have a question for Kellen. So, Kellen, could you explain to me what it's like to be an expert at tonight's meeting?
Yeah.
Okay, go right ahead.
What?
Tell me what it's like to be an expert at tonight's meeting. Okay, let me ask you this. Are you able to tell me what you do in school to improve your skills in talking to people?
Yes.
What do you do?
I tell the teacher if I don't get to participate talking.
Very good.
Thanks.
Your turn, Mr. Baumgart.
I'm our wonderful youngest learner, for sure.
Let me ask you a question first. Native Spanish and native, who have we got up here?
We have 4
What do we have up here?
4 wonderful students from our dual language programs, 2 native English speakers and 2 native Spanish speakers.
Okay, could I speak one of the native Spanish speakers?
Sure.
Okay, just pick one. I don't care. Okay, would you tell me? Are you enjoying learning to speak and write and read in English?
No.
Yep. Well, we've gotten real good on the yeses and nos, I guess.
Leer, hablar, escribir, ¿te gusta? ¿Por qué? ¿Puedes explicar por qué? ¿Por qué te gusta?
Is Selena here?
Yes.
Yes.
Selena. Selena, ¿habla español su casa? ¿Su familia española? ¿Habla español? Always? Always you speak Spanish at home? And at school, how much do you speak English and Spanish?
Mucho.
Mucho both?
Good.
So just this part.
So do you help the other non-Spanish speakers learn Spanish in your school? You don't help at all.
Oh, no.
Okay.
Question 2.
The same question? What was that question?
Do you help the children who are still learning Spanish in our classroom?
Sí.
And how do you do that? ¿Cómo haces? With your bilingual partner, how would you help your bilingual partner?
Questions are pretty tough.
English if you want.
Yes. Yeah, you can say it in English if you want.
Say it.
How do you talk to your bilingual partner? Go back and forth with the questions.
Sí.
That really helps you out, right? Yeah.
I just want to commend our little ones here tonight. It's not easy to stand in front of a school board.
They've been very patient.
From
too.
experience,
Yes.
and it's hard enough for me. I'm sweating under the suit, and here they are, just wonderfully performing. So,
You get it.
thank you
get
for
it.
your time tonight.
Nice
Thank you,
job.
Jeremy and
Thanks,
team.
guys. Yep.
Thank you, Joe.
They were.
Thank you, Joe.
I can see what you're doing.
Okay, as we move along in our meeting tonight, we move into action items. The first action item is approval of our teaching and learning committee meeting minutes from October 1st, 2019.
I'll move for approval of the minutes from October.
Okay. Do I have a motion and second for approval of the teaching and learning committee meeting minutes from October 1st? Any questions, discussion, corrections? I see none. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed? Abstained? One.
I abstain.
Okay. Motion passes 4-0 with one abstention.
401, yeah.
Okay. Next action item, approval of Math Vision 2020. And we have, I think, Dan Kieser and Dan
Here in the hall.
Porchinski. Dan Kieser is our Director of Secondary Learning, and Dan Porchinski is our instructional coach in the district. So we want to welcome
Yes,
both.
half of the Dan show.
Okay, sounds good.
It's okay.
Welcome, Dan Kieser.
Yes, thank you for having me back. Tonight is opportunity to formally ask the board for approval of our Math Vision model. And for tonight, I just printed for the board 3 things that you should have. You should have the model of the math course sequence, which is the little infographic that shows the different courses. The sheet with information about higher education, so the feedback around what colleges and universities have been saying in terms of moving to an integrated math model and its impact on admissions, which we shared. And then the third piece is this orange sheet that really speaks to what is the next steps. So if this vision is approved, the next steps going down the road are really about looking at instructional material resources. And so at this point, there really isn't a financial impact as part of the proposal, because part of our board policy is that when we move down this road, any instructional resources in the forms of textbooks would come before the board. And at that point, that will be our single biggest cost in the short term as we roll this out. Long-term costs, we build within our overall budget professional development. So through our summer institutes in the beginning of the year, our Waukesha ones in the middle of the year, we would build within our plan ongoing professional development. In some cases, we would negotiate as part of any instructional resources professional development that would be coming in. But long-term, we would look to build teacher leaders and help to do kind of a train-the-trainer model. So that way we're not self-reliant on external professional development, but actually leverage the strength and resources that we have with our math teachers in the district, which we have many. So we already do a lot of professional development in mathematics annually. This would just be tailoring that to this new model. So some of this work is already moving forward as far as starting to slowly look at curricular resources. We have the same group of teachers that have been a part of the work, vetting resources and getting them down to a manageable amount. This month, we would look to, if this were approved, to get that down to 2 or 3 resources. And again, this DPI grant that we have would cover the cost of our staff doing this work, as well as purchasing any of these resources that we would then pilot this winter going into the spring to get down to that 1 resource. Depending on the cost of that resource, that grant money could be used to supplement the initial cost of next year's pilot even at each of the 3 buildings. And then as you can see, we would successively go in a pilot group, meaning a teacher at each school and a cohort of students with that teacher, leading the way, allowing us an opportunity to see all of the things that we couldn't see or anticipate as we roll things out. There's always hiccups and things, and it's easier to work with individual teachers before we do a full rollout. And then using our professional development model that we already have established in the district, we would then roll that out to all of the math teachers at the high school level so they all get common learning. So that's why this is a now decision with long-term dividends, because this is a 4 to 5 year rollout process. So with that, I'm happy to answer any additional questions people have.
Mr. Bryan.
Yeah, I'm looking at this course sequence.
Yes.
And been a supporter of this all the way through, so it hasn't changed tonight, but I'm looking for a little bit of clarity here.
Sure.
When you go to that top bar where it says Integrated Math 3 with Pre-Calc, it has Calc AB, Calc BC, and then in the big box underneath it has AP Calc AB and AP Calc BC.
Yep.
Aren't those 2 in the big box underneath also available in the box up above, or?
And it's a great question. So when the teachers and Dan and I were sitting down and looking at this, we knew at the onset we already have kids that max out our district course offerings, and so we wanted to show that we are cognizant that we have students who excel through math, and we wanted to demonstrate that there could be a pathway that goes there. But again, Calc AB and Calc BC are elective options, not knowing what students do in the summertime. Although it is infrequent, we do have students who go off and do summer learning and then bring those credits back. Our new youth options has been changed to allow summer learning. So we actually have had a fair number of students who've accessed that yet this summer, not necessarily in mathematics, more in our career and technical education areas. But that isn't to say that a student couldn't take a course in the summertime at Carroll University or WCTC that would propel them down that pike. So it's not eliminating an option. It's saying that there's a probability in this model that kids would self-accelerate. Does that help?
That's a follow-up question.
Go ahead, Mr. Bryan.
So I'm just kind of curious because I'm not familiar with the course offerings at WCTC.
Sure.
Are we able to offer more of a higher level math programming for the most advanced students than WCTC, or do they have their own AP Calc courses at WCTC?
They actually do have a calc sequence. The way the state law is written around the youth options, which is now called Early College Credit Options, or ECCP, says that if a student wants to take a course at a higher ed institution and we offer that course, or at least a course that is 80% similar to the course that they want, we have to deny it. So just because we have Calc 2 here means that second semester Calc is not available to students who want to take it at the higher ed institution. Now, if there is a course that is at the college level tangential to it, but not directly aligned to the courses that we have, that we would allow. So for instance, linear algebra is not a course that we offer. It is tangential to Calc 1 and Calc 2. It is an accelerated course, and some of our students do take that course, albeit they're all seniors, and so they're on their way out. But that isn't to say that 5 years into the future, we have a student who's accelerated who would take advantage of that opportunity.
Mr. Baumgart.
Appreciated the orange sheet. Just a question or two that's raised with me. Are you already looking at resources? Because it indicates here you probably started that like October, November. You're looking at some resources now?
Yes, so we had the team, we sent this out to all of the high school math teachers to say, nominate resources that align to this vision that we've set. There were about 9 resources that were recommended. We narrowed that down to 6 at this point. With the team that has been doing the work, we took 2 days where we took half the team, and then the other half of the team, we calibrated around a curriculum rubric to vet those courses. And from the 9, we're down to 6. We're kind of in a holding pattern, but we aligned that pattern so that these 2 things would hopefully work in tangent.
That answers the second part of my question. That is, are there enough resources out there to look at it? And you're saying yes, quite simply there are.
Yeah.
And the only other comment I have, and it's a comment, not a question, you mentioned it's going to take 5 years to roll this out. And that's, in a way, it's a shame because you got us pretty excited about this for the last 2 months. And now we know we're going to have to wait, but that is the right thing to do. And we will understand that, so.
Thank you.
Anything else? Mr. Como.
Thank you. Looking at the current and possible course options, a big box.
Yes.
I'm assuming there may be some prerequisites to take some of those courses. So, for example, a prereq to take AP Calc BC, I would assume that you'd have a prereq of AP, you'd have to have AP Calc AB first. Is that correct?
Unless there was some learning that the student had taken that would demonstrate that they've already mastered that, and so then we would put them.
Okay, and is that true for all of those in this bigger box?
Ideally, with the exception of, for instance, Calc A, B, and BC, which are sequential, so 1 and 2. The examples that are in there are a mix of courses that we currently have in our course guide and courses that were brainstormings from our high school math teachers, all intended to be options that would not have prerequisites to them.
Okay.
We want to try to eliminate that so that it was more guided by interest.
Sure.
For instance, like math analytics would be more focused around people who want to do data analytics, where construction geometry would be students who want more of a hands-on approach to learning some of those geometric pieces that they would see in the world. So
yeah, I agree with that approach to have fewer prereqs for each of those classes in the big box. The only one that I could see a relationship between was the two.
Yep, those two exactly.
Bottom right. So okay, yeah, thank you, Dan.
Yes.
Mr. Baumgart.
Yeah, I don't know why I didn't see this earlier, but I wasn't aware that we have a financial literacy class.
We currently do not. That was one that's proposed, and we do offer financial litsocial through CTE, and there's also a way to address it through social studies.
Okay.
So really, it's consumer math is really the more appropriate course that.
All right, and I'm really glad to see that, by the way.
And
Yeah.
working with Molly.
I know where that
she-
was coming from. Thank you. That's
Not a
the only-
problem.
Anything else from committee members?
Well,
Mr. Baumgart.
this is an action item, so I'm going to move for approval of the change to a Math Vision 2020 program.
Do I have a second? Ms. Roddy, second? So it's been motioned and seconded, and we're going to take a vote on this action item. All in favor, please say aye. Or any further discussion first, or any other questions? Okay, good. Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes, Stacy, 5-0. Thank you very much. And thank you very much, Dan Keyser, to you, your team, your leadership, your comprehensive in-depth planning. We look forward to future updates at meetings down the road. Thank you
Yes,
very much for all your
absolutely.
hard work,
Yes.
as well as from your team. Thank you.
Thanks.
Nice job. Next action item this evening is approval of the 2019-2020 overnight field trip requests that we have in front of us.
I have some questions.
Yes.
They're
Mr.
open
Como.
for discussion now? Or,
Yes.
or were we going to have an introduction, or?
Jody, do you have anything that? Okay.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Yeah,
Mr.
so
Como.
I'm just going to take the first one here real quick, the DECA State for the 3 high schools. I just needed some clarification. Are the students paying 100%, or it is at the state competition level, or are we reimbursing? They didn't say there was going to be reimbursement, but I was confused by that.
That's a state competition, so we pay for that. I don't know where you're looking, that shows.
Well, it says cost per student, and then it says 100% paid for by the student.
That's an error. I apologize for that.
Okay, and so I assume the same thing is true for at the national level.
When they qualify for state nationals, then the site picks up.
That's what I thought.
They,
I didn't know if that changed.
they do
So-
fundraise for these things as well, and it goes into
That
their
offsets,
accounts.
that offsets it? Okay. And then I had, let's see. Two other questions, if I could find them here. Give me a second. On the very last one, going to Tanzania.
Wait, we're only doing 1 year at a time, right?
Oh, I don't know.
I misunderstand that.
Are we doing that? Oh, okay, I don't know. Are we doing just one?
Greg, did
at a
you just
time,
ask for
or-
19 and 20 now, or 20 and 21?
It says 1920.
So I think if is this on? I think per practice, the board should consider all the requests. If there's a request that you want to have pulled out separate for discussion,
Okay.
we could do that. If you, depending on the conversation, how you want to vote, we can do that as well. Meaning, we usually vote for all in a package, but if a board member has an issue, we can pull that for separate consideration.
I wasn't talking about voting, I just had questions.
Right, go ahead.
Just general questions.
I think it's
so-
fine.
Yep.
Yeah, so, let me get back to where I was. I flipped my pages around here. Okay. Okay, I got it. The Tanzania one. One thing, the company that offers this, EF, is that called EF? Is that the travel agent, or what's EF?
I'm just going to bring my peeps up because I see you. I was looking for you. I'm sorry I couldn't find you in the crowd. Thank you. Come on up. We asked them to join. last month there was a little bit of a discussion on this, Mr. Como, so we asked these two to come tonight to be able to answer questions.
Okay.
So.
Thank you for having us. Yes, EF is the company that we travel with. It stands for Education First Tours, and
Okay.
we've been traveling with them for the past 4 years.
All right. And my biggest concern is the global safety record. You know, how have they been? How are they rated?
They've been excellent in our past 4 years. We work with an agent and a company that does check the U.S. travel, security, and safety. There is an insurance piece called the Global Peace of Mind, where if there was any kind of elevation in the safety concerns, for free of charge, we could completely change our destination. So that's just been something that we've been working with.
And that's something that they monitor, or do we monitor, or both of us? Or?
They monitor, but I do have parents that monitor the news, you know, so they
Sure.
will reach out to me, and then I will reach out to
And
the
they may
company.
reach out to me, and that's why I'm asking this question.
Absolutely, and then I'm able to connect with them with any concerns as well, even though I might not necessarily find it on the U.S. Department of Travel.
Okay. And just kind of out of curiosity, the global citizenship, is that an activity or is it a club?
It's actually a club that we now have.
Okay. How long's the club been around?
So we've been traveling, this will be our 5th year this summer, and so the Tanzania trip is actually our 6th year.
Excellent, excellent. I think it sounds like a great opportunity. Biggest concern is safety. I think that's true. Leaving our country to any country, these questions would be asked. How did the students pick the location, or how was that determined?
The students have been asking for Africa and China, and so we worked with EF to see what was offered. We were originally going to go to China, except that the service company that EF pairs up with determined that the location didn't need the service work anymore. So we truly go to areas that could use a helping hand with a project. And so the Tanzania trip was still somewhere that they needed assistance, and that's how we decided on that.
Excellent. Thank you.
Mr. Baumgart.
A couple comments. One on the Trees for Tomorrow out of South. I really appreciated the contract that they presented to you. Who's South? That's you're West, right? Well, whatever. The South program going to Trees for Tomorrow, which I'm somewhat familiar with from years ago. That's all you need to know. They wrote their own contract in terms of behavior, which I thought was very well done in here, and appreciated that. And so that was on that item. I am going to be asking for the Tanzania trip to be separated on this one. As I've said in the past, I'm getting a little bit concerned with the constant growth of our international travel and the costs that are involved with international travel. And this one is going to be one that I'm going to be not in favor of. I understand the need for community service programs and stuff like that, but I believe we have so many places in the United States that need community service that we don't need to go to Tanzania to do it. And I know that the kids are going to love to go to places that are far away and very expensive to get to, but I'm just not in favor of that anymore. It's climbed too far for me.
Mr. Bryan.
So, Committee Chairman, may I suggest, since we do have the West people up here right now, that we take up the Tanzania trip first?
Sounds good.
And resolve that issue before we move on to the other ones, if it's okay. So I guess in order to do that, I'll move for the Tanzania trip.
Okay.
Approval?
Okay. I have a second.
Open it up to discussion.
And now we have discussion. Yes.
At the last month's committee meeting, there was a request to have an update from the U.S. Department of State on the travel advisory. If the committee is, it's currently at a level 2. It says exercised increased caution. The issues are due to crime, terrorism, health issues, and targeting of LGBTQ in persons. Goes on to talk about how there was I apologize, September 10th of 2019, there was a report of probable Ebola in the country. So just to make the committee aware of the leveled travel caution that the Department of State has out there about Tanzania.
Real quickly, you mentioned a level 2. What are the levels and how does that construct
So
itself?
it's a 4-level system, if I'm remembering it correctly. Level 1 is exercise normal caution.
1 is
Level
the good
2
one and 4 is the
Level
dangerous?
2 is increased caution. The concerns that are out there though right now are what I mentioned: terrorism, crime, targeting of LGBTQ students or individuals, and the possible Ebola in the country.
Mr. Colma.
Have parents been notified of the level 2
We haven't
that's been issued by the United
discussed this trip
States?
yet, since it hasn't been approved yet. All of the other countries that we've traveled to have been level 2 when we've been there. The United States is right now at a level 2, so is Germany, Italy, and France.
Okay. At what level would you consider canceling?
EF's policy is that a 3, they will not send a group 2. So if it were to hit a 3, we would be able to use that peace of mind to go somewhere else. In addition to the peace of mind, up until 45 days before we leave as a group, Katie and I can change our destination as well, regardless of what the level is at.
Do we have anything in the permission slips and the information? I didn't read everything, all the release and agreements, on exposing, having people agree, the parents agree to expose their children to Ebola or any other diseases, in that country?
Yes, within the sign-up sheet, there is that health and danger and thing that they are signing. We do also, part of global citizenship, have our students go to the Pro Healthcare Travel Clinic or their pediatrician. The Pro Healthcare runs a report of just malaria or any kind of other diseases and then suggests vaccinations before traveling, which is what we've done for Ecuador and Peru and the Dominican.
So those are suggested and recommended to parents also. All parents will receive this information, or do they have to seek it out?
No, all parents will receive that information.
Okay.
Any other, Mr. O'Brien?
Okay, so we talked about trips in the past. Have both of you been involved in trips in the past? Okay. Can you give me an idea of the participation rates in past trips? I think in the previous it said that we had Ecuador and Peru. How many students went to Peru, for example, and where was that? Where did they go in Peru?
Well, our first trip, we had a total of 9 students.
Okay.
Our second trip, we had 18 students and 3 chaperones, followed by a group of 11, correct me. And then this past year, I did not participate because I had a baby, but we had another
9 students.
Yeah.
Okay, but in the Peruvian one, you had one in Peru, right? 2018, that was just 2 years ago. That was one of the more expensive ones. It was $4,400 back then, okay, which would be similar to what we're expecting here. How many children attended that, and where did they go? Do you recall?
So the one to Ecuador, that was one of our larger groups.
Peru?
Peru was the more expensive one. Sorry. I was going to say, I thought the Ecuador. Oh. I was going to say, I think we mistyped that one because the Ecuador one, I do apologize. That was the one where we actually had 18 students attend that one.
Ecuador. Okay, now Peru.
Yep. We went to Machu Picchu. We did our service on Lake Titicaca, and so we were just through the country traveling that way.
Okay. Your 18 students that went to Ecuador, I know where Machu Picchu is. I know how remote that is to get to. What about the Ecuador trip? Was that a relatively remote travel trip as well?
Yes, yes.
And is the Tanzania trip similar, where you're flying someplace and then there's quite a bit of remote travel inward as well?
This one is not as remote in that we will have our layover in Amsterdam, and then we will end up at the airport in Kilimanjaro. And then the bus ride to our hotel is 30 minutes from there, and then everything is within close proximate distance.
Okay. So it's definitely less difficult than Peru. I can tell you that. Because that's fairly...
Arrowhead had done this trip 2 years ago, and I spoke with the leader, and he just mentioned that he had better Wi-Fi in Tanzania than he did when he was in Ecuador when they did the same trip as us as well. He mentioned it was just good cell phone service, easily connected throughout the trip.
Now you're located close to a relatively urban area, so I suppose that would be the case. So you have your club. Last year you had 18. What would you expect would be the participation in this trip?
Well, we've actually found that the smaller numbers is what we prefer. We're not against taking larger groups of students. It's just when we're talking about going through TSA checks and counting students, all that kind of stuff, it helps to have a smaller number of students, because we would much rather be able to look up and be able to count 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Versus 18, it gets a little bit more tricky that way. So we would like to limit it to 12, but we're not going to tell anyone no.
Okay. So your target, I'm not trying to look for more, I'm just trying to figure out what. Okay, so your target would be not more than 12, but if it ends up being more than 12, it ends up being more than 12. So you're looking between probably 9 to 12 students or 8 to 12 students. Okay.
Mr. Como.
If it does go above 12, are you willing to add a chaperone?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you'll keep the ratio of no higher than a 6-to-1 ratio?
Correct.
Right, yes.
So, and actually to add to that, so this summer we will be traveling to the Amazon rainforest in Ecuador, and we currently have 11 students signed up, and we've already been discussing actually bringing on a third chaperone with just the 11 students that we have.
So this question is for Jody. Do we ever follow up and ask how many chaperones actually went and after the trip or anything like that?
We ask for the chaperones when they request the trips.
The ratio's listed here,
Right.
but the
Yeah.
question is about follow-up.
But because we ask for this information so far ahead of the actual trip dates, sometimes they do need to get more information to me, and I do keep a spreadsheet and I check.
Okay. So I would appreciate checking on
Okay.
on this one, if you could put a note
I'll
on it,
communicate
if
with
it
these two.
passes,
Mm-hmm. Okay.
to keep it at the 6-to-1 ratio.
Mr. O'Brien.
Okay, back to the cost associated with this. You know, the students have their costs, and what are the district's cost for this trip? What would be our cost associated with this clip?
There is no cost on your part.
There's a cost for us if we add chaperones. I mean, you guys are covering your own way and your own time, or?
We, over the last 4 years, have received almost $50,000 in donations as a group. That does not include the donations that students are getting on their own from family and friends. We've also had students seek out jobs to cut the cost as well. And so part of the donation money goes towards any sort of cost that might come up. But as part of this club, we don't get a stipend. And even if we did receive a stipend, we would actually put it towards the bus fee, things like that.
So the answer to my question is you're paying your own way, more or less, except for whatever comes in as a donation, as chaperones or as staff of the district.
Absolutely.
Okay. Like Mr. Baumgart, I had a lot of concerns I think we share the same reasons for the concerns that we have. But I would say that since it's a club, you know, and it's a district, it's a club, and I don't think we want to discourage clubs like this from forming and operating within our school district, which I think if we didn't agree to these types of trips, then we certainly wouldn't have these types of clubs. So I'm more inclined to support it tonight than I was a month ago. Plus, it was nice to have you here to provide more information, which is greatly appreciated.
Any other questions, discussion? Ms. Roddy.
I have a couple. One, first I'll direct to Joe. When you looked up the current advisory level, was that just current, or does it show what previous levels were, or how often does that level change?
Yeah, it's updated by event or frequently. If there's no events, you still get an update. I get emails from around the world, or from the Department of State on this topic from various countries. So occasionally I will get one as a country adjusts, or it will just remain as is. This one, the most recent information on Tanzania was the September 10th Ebola information. And then they had their general level 2 warning, and for the
the reason I asked, I just try to figure out what the trend was of the safety level, seeing how this is it's so far out yet. They're not looking till the summer of 2021. Okay, so we've got a little ways yet to go. Okay, thank you for answering that question. And then just lastly, a statement. I trust that you're going to do your due diligence. You're not going to walk our students. And it is extracurricular. I agree with Mr. O'Brien in that we don't want to discourage these types of things, these learning experiences, these opportunities to serve the global community. So I appreciate your efforts in that. So we'll just keep up to date from the parents, and as Joe said, I'm sure we'll get calls if they're not comfortable with it. But that's all I wanted to make mention of.
Mr. O'Brien.
So the only thing I think that, in addition to everything else, I know you're a club, and I know, but you, as a club, you function and operate out of the school district of Waukesha. So there's a responsibility on the part of the school district of Waukesha. So I want to make sure that Mr. Cook and Ms. Landish go through the process of getting the proper liability waivers in place through legal counsel for the participants to sign, and not only the children but the chaperones, to make sure that they're aware of all the risk associated with, and they're acknowledging those risks and waiving the liability for the district as part of the process.
Mr. Como.
Do you know where the nearest embassy is?
Not right now.
Will you?
Yes. Yes.
Will the students know?
Yes.
Does EF train them in that and keeping their passports and all of that kind of international travel kind of things? So they're going to be taught appropriately and become aware of how to be an international traveler.
On the last trip that I traveled on, again, that was not this summer, but the previous summer before that, we got paired up with another school, and they were wonderful participants, but I could totally tell the difference between their group and our group in regards to prepping the students ahead of time. We have monthly meetings with the students where we talk about our expectations, dress code, behaviors, the perception of Americans in other countries. And it's amazing, the students that we work with, and then how they actually keep each other in line when we are abroad. But we are very adamant about personal belongings, keeping them safe, the passports safe. They will have an emergency card with contact information on it that they will keep on them at all times as well.
Well, that's good to know, because those are things that we can take for granted. And perhaps if you've been an international traveler before and is probably could be their first time, and there's just some basic things that we need to make sure that they're aware of that could be extremely important if necessary. Chances of it being necessary is probably pretty low, but if you need to know, and it's important. So I'm glad that you're taking those steps to prepare them properly, and not just in emergency scenarios, but differences in culture and in how we are perceived. Wow, that sounds really good.
And then you'll have contact with parents as well, right?
Absolutely.
Okay, and when would that start if it's approved?
So as soon as we get this trip approved, we then have to contact our EF contact, and then they get things rolling on their end in regards to getting some of the documentation started. We could probably hold our first enrollment meeting within the next month. And we want to really make sure that we give students, especially with this trip, enough time to be able to reach out and do some donation, or getting some donations from corporate sponsors.
Okay, thank you. Mr. O'Brien.
So these liability waiver documents probably should become part of our policy for trips going forward, if we don't already have it. And we need to review our policy on this.
Talk about that next
week. Yeah. Okay, thanks.
Okay, anything else? Okay, we've had motion and second for approval of the West High School trip to Tanzania in June and July of 2021. All in favor for approval of this, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Motion passes, Stacy, 4-1. Yep, thank you for being here tonight, yeah. Now we go back to our other field trips for 2019-2020 that have been presented tonight with the amendment to the DECA field trip with the cost change that Mr. Como mentioned.
I think you're also going to include the 2021 Horning.
Oh, okay. There's
Eighth
one.
grade
Okay.
Washington,
Sorry,
D.C.
yep.
trip.
So including the 2021 Horning trip as well. Mr. O'Brien.
I move for approval.
Second.
Second. So it's been moved and seconded for approval of the 2019, 2020, 2021 field trips presented here this evening. All in favor, please say aye.
Bit of discussion.
Oh, one more. Discussion, any further discussion?
Nope.
Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes, Stacy, 5-0. Thank you. Yes.
May just tail a comment to that. I just so happened to run into some of our cross-country runners this last weekend while they were waiting to go compete. And I went running after them like a crazy woman. And my girls were like, Mom, that's our school. They saw the Waukesha North. And just kind of seeing them around town, they were all very well behaved. When I approached them, they spoke very well, carried themselves well. So our kids are behaving away from home.
It's good to hear. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. Okay, moving along this evening to our informational item. We have one this evening, Social Studies curricular update. And this evening tonight we have Dan Kieser, Director of Secondary Learning. We have Dee Garcia, Director of Multilingual and Global Education. And we have Melissa Yao, Director of Elementary Learning. So welcome.
Thank you. Can you hear okay? Okay, tonight we are going to be recapping and bringing to you once again the opportunity to learn about the process that we are undergoing in terms of adopting the Wisconsin State Social Studies standards. You can remember that last spring we were with you, and at that time we talked a little bit about the process that the state went through to adopt the new standards in 2019. We've gone from hundreds of standards down to 27 standards across 6 disciplinary strands, and we'll talk a little bit about those strands today. And we also have a progression that extends from kindergarten all the way up through 12th grade. So social studies is not approached in a compartmentalized or grade level approach, but really represents a strand of learning across a continuum. So Dr. Evers formally adopted the social studies standards in May of 2018. The state of Wisconsin has worked with the National Council for the Social Studies, the National Curriculum Standards for Social Studies, the Geography Education National Implementation Project, as well as the American Psychological Association, the Council for Economic Education, as well as the very important College Board that oversees all of our advanced placement courses. In addition to that, our state has collaborated with the states of Delaware, Iowa, and Illinois. And since that time of adoption, we've continued to collaborate with other organizations, including the Wisconsin Historical Society.
So DPI is taking us through a 3-year process. We are in year 2 now, so we presented last year and presented this format. We are following the state's guidelines in this, and so The first year, we've spent a lot of time in the shifts and pedagogy. As Dee mentioned, it's shifted to 27 different standard areas. We have also been looking at the increased rigor and how the standards now include literacy, environmental ed, and technology that are aligned in the standards as well. Year 2, we're digging deeper into those standards. The state has aligned the standards more deeply at the elementary level and aligned them with targets. So we're very excited about what will be happening for our students at the elementary level and feel it will have a great impact in their middle school and high school years. Year 3 will be digging deeper into the how the state standards impact the state assessment. So what we have done in the school district of Waukesha, we have formed a district social studies team. Last year we had 3 meetings. Dan, Dee, and I also attended 3 meetings with DPI to be trained in these standards. Then we have brought the learning back to the team. This summer at Summer Institute, we had team members offer learning sessions around the new social studies standards. We also had David O'Connor from DPI come in and lead learning sessions around the American Indians in Wisconsin, because that is a big part that Dan will speak to later in the new standards that we want to make sure are addressed. This year, in year 2, we are developing the social studies vision for the district and beginning to map out the K-12 progression of the standards, and we'll begin to look at resources as well to support the instruction of the standards for our students.
So as Dee and Melissa had shared, our social studies standards have become more focused, down to 27 across our individual areas. But they also they also fall into 5 main shifts within that. And so the change in practice that this team of 30 that we have assembled to help us do this work has really been focusing in on what are these 5 in relation to what we currently offer to prepare us in what is yet to come. So the biggest thing in here is really in the center, this idea that no longer do we separate out skills, content, and knowledge. Is really that balance of building all 3 at the same time. Sometimes we might spend more time in a course that focuses on skill development, but that skill has to be attached to something. And so the conversation around what knowledge base are we building up, K-12, is a discussion that we are looking forward to engaging throughout the work of this year. Our commitment to inquiry, which cuts across the entire swath of standards, is really built around taking our background knowledge, asking engaging questions in terms of wanting to probe why did this happen and what can we learn about this, leading to the idea that we are building, our goal is to build civically minded students who are engaged in the homes, communities, and world around them in authentic ways. So the idea that what starts in kindergarten grows over time will lead us to having conversations with our high school reps around what courses do we currently offer, how might they look different, knowing that we're going to have a new background knowledge of students that's coming to us differently, more civically minded, more inquiry driven, and what courses could we possibly create in the future. For instance, in DPI conversation, we've talked about like, what would an ethnic studies course look like that blends both the behavioral sciences, history, sociology, and so forth all together, or what DPI uses as a term, fusion style courses. But in and amongst all of this, there are things that we absolutely cannot lose sight of. Melissa had mentioned that our literacy, our digital literacy, our environmental science, and our American Indian studies are all things that are embedded within the new social studies standards. We had the great opportunity to spend a day of learning with David O'Connor here in CISA 1, and we were so impacted by the message and the information that he has shared with us and has created for every district in the state, that we invite him to our summer institute, where he led sessions for an entire day and had a lot of positive reviews. So Act 31 here really speaks to American Indian studies and how it is the studies of the tribes and bands in Wisconsin, and really speaking about tribal sovereignty being a teaching point. All of these pieces are going to be pieces that we look intentionally across all of our standards as we do the work in year 2.
Just a quick question on that.
No.
Act 31, how long has that been in place?
It's a good question. I don't remember off the top of my head.
As this was brought up at the WASB meeting, I was at, about curriculum relative to what's mandated by the state, what's done and what's not done, and one of them was...
I'm just looking at my notes here, and I will find that and...
I think that's a pretty old act, and we probably haven't been following it like almost everybody else in the state.
Correct, and we are going to make sure that's corrected, because it's important.
It's very interesting history, actually. Wisconsin is in the main, everything that happened westward happened here first. So what happened east came to Wisconsin. So we're kind of like the main, we're like Poland for the Native Americans.
So as we move forward with our committee, we have decided that one of the next places that we need to go is in developing a vision for social studies and social science here in the school district, and that vision will help support us through challenging conversation, innovative conversation, support for what we believe about learners and what we believe about learning. So the draft vision that we have tonight, we hope will be a pathway to our future curriculum development. I'm going to go ahead and read it for those of us that are not able to see the screen well from at home. Through the integrated study, inquiry, and application of the individual disciplines of social studies, being behavior sciences, economics, geography, history, and political science, School District of Waukesha students will be engaged and informed so that they graduate able to collaborate, participate civically, and thrive in our interdependent world. We hope that these statements here will help us to further develop some core values around collaboration that support our decision-making and curriculum development. That's our update.
Yes.
Any questions? Mr. Como.
From a civic perspective, just wondering, are we gaining? Are we dropping things? How does it compare to what we're doing now? Is it going to be more rigorous? I'm curious from a civic perspective.
I can share that it will be more participatory. So the civic engagement portion of the standards really support a vision that all of our children have an opportunity and responsibility to be active civically. We might see that today in the forms of supporting a community endeavor. We see lots of schools that go out and do collections and different types of things. We're going to be able to help our teachers to get their minds around the prioritization of a child developing that disposition as a civically engaged and civically active participant.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And I think back to when I was a child, and what I learned in school from that perspective, and other organizations like Boy Scouts, very civically, minded, oriented. So just it's an important aspect of what you're doing. I think what you're undertaking is huge. I was going to ask the question, how big of a change is this, moving from one set of standards to another? Because we've had this previous set of standards about 10 years, I want to say?
More than that.
More than that?
Yeah.
So this is really a pretty big shift. I thought it was primarily positive just from a simplification perspective of the number of standards, but I'm not sure if it really is all that simplified. So I would be curious to know your opinion, not necessarily even now, but over time as you go through this, what your thoughts are as you go through the process.
Share with the committee that we've had groups of teachers going through gap analysis. So they are comparing what they currently do to new standards and have found it quite liberating to find standards that are as clear and as continuous across a band of grades, whereas previously it was one grade didn't know how it communicated to the next grade, and then it didn't know how it communicated 6 years from then. So in that way, it's provided a lot of clarity, and teachers feel very motivated to be successful.
And that's why you need to assure the continuity as the kids go through elementary, middle, and high school, and there needs to be some greater collaboration, I guess.
And to your point around civic engagement, even in with the environmental science standards, we currently have environmental studies, and then we just recently approved last year, launching this year, our AP Environmental Science. And in both of those classes, I can speak from being in there, the level of civic engagement in terms of having students take a stand on an issue and talk about what would they do in order to promote or oppose certain things that are currently in the news, and do it in a way that offers civil discourse, not I'm right, you're wrong, but I'm sharing my point, I'm listening to your point, and we're having a discussion
to debate,
about it.
truly debate,
Right.
as opposed to attack and,
Correct.
Sure. Thank you.
Anything else? Will the new standards eventually appear like in the state testing? Or is there any?
That's what year 3 would
Year 3, so
showed
next year.
is that, what the state will be taking on.
So
eventually
2021,
it will
it would be part of the
for like the new standards will
board
be part
exam.
of the state test.
Make sure that they're being taught and implemented. Yep. Sounds good. Anything else?
Not today.
Thanks.
Thank you.
That's good. Thank you so much. Have a good night.
More to come.
Okay, we're moving on to our discussion items this evening. First one is baking for culinary, WCTC transcripted course. And I know we have Molly Havenschild here tonight, Career and Technology Education Coordinator. And if Molly, if you could introduce
Absolutely, I'd love to.
other staff members that are with us tonight doing the presentation, I would appreciate it. Before
Absolutely.
you get started, thank you.
So with me tonight, I have the pleasure of joining me with Christine Schmidt from Waukesha South and Bridget Scally from Waukesha West. And they currently teach quite a number of our family and consumer sciences classes as well as our culinary arts class right now. So this is a repeat from last month, so this is not necessarily new information to you, just a few tweaks in what we shared. But the new course is called Baking for Culinary. The need for the course really came from the students primarily and the interest in furthering their culinary pathway. But in addition, it's a response to industry need. Hospitality and tourism is a growing industry, and it's not going anywhere. I shared last month that it's predicted to grow between 11 and 15%. And while McDonald's can replace a kiosk for you to order the food, we haven't gotten to the part where they can make delicious torts and pies. So we're not there yet. In addition, the culinary arts track is really supported by our neighbor, WCTC. They have multiple programs from associate's degrees, technical diplomas, and certifications. I had the pleasure of being there 2 Fridays ago for a K-12 symposium in which they toured us through different fields of study. And one we happened to go into that day was actually the baking program. So not only the associate dean, but one of their instructors led us through an activity where they talked about the science of baking chocolate chip cookies. Now, I'm sorry, all of us that didn't eat dinner yet, I'm going to talk about chocolate chip cookies for a hot second, but she went through and showed us just different techniques that she learned from industry and how she applies it to the science of cookies. The spread, things I didn't know, the color, the crunchiness, and of course we made chocolate chip cookies and got to eat them. But what I did find out while there was there's actually a waiting list for the baking program at WCTC. They cap it at 16 students, and every year they have a list of waiting. So this class could fast track our students into that program by allowing them to take the course with us. The learning target, oh, go ahead, Ben.
Just interrupt a minute. Yeah, that last item bothered me. 16 people are allowed to take it now?
Yes.
Are you saying our kids would be part of that 16?
No,
Say that
that's just
again,
it.
then.
So 16 is the WCTC program at their campus, correct?
And this would be ours?
Yes. So what a nice opportunity for our students. And last I checked, we don't cap at 16, right? No. Okay. So we already shared this. We focused on really 3 main learning targets, and they came from the state family and consumer science learning targets and state standards, as well as from WCTC's feedback. I'm not going to read them to you. You've seen them already. And then the units of study. This came up in the last meeting just about why we picked what we picked. Number 1, the profession of baking includes just about the culinary program, the baking pathway, as well as safety, sanitation, food prep. Then the main units align with WCTC's units as well. So that's kind of how we had derived this list. In addition, we looked at our culinary arts program and decided to pull out certain elements that we could spend more time on. We could spend an entire semester just looking at cookie recipes and making cookies and learning about how that can be a successful trade, but we don't need to do that. But we can pare it out from our culinary arts program and allow culinary to focus on some different units of study. So that's kind of how we arrived at this list. It is paired with WCTC for transcripted credit. The students can earn 3 credits for this, and this would be in addition to the credits that we have aligned with them for our sports, fitness, and nutrition and culinary arts program. That's another 3 credits that the students could earn. So potentially our students could leave this pathway with 6 credits already towards that program, as well as a Serve Safe certification. I always get those backwards. So that's something that we added this year for our students to receive, and that's applicable to any job that they could go get in the food service industry right now. Last piece of information just relates to transcripted credit. I wanted to update you on these numbers because we just got some new ones. Transcripted credit in Waukesha is something that we really should be very, very proud of. We have the most transcripted courses out of every Waukesha County school, and right now we're sitting at 14. This would bring us to 15. In addition, we have the most student participation. If you look at that number, 2,507 credits were earned by our students just from transcripted credit. That does not include dual enrollment. That does not include Start College Now, early college credit. And that saves our students quite a bit of money and time. So it's something that we are grateful for in Waukesha, and especially in CTE, but this would help even add to that dollar amount and credit earned.
Yeah, I think we've led the county for quite a number of years. We get a report from WCTC every year on that, and I'm really glad to see our high participation. I do have one other question, Greg. Is that okay
Yes,
if
go
I?
ahead. Yeah.
In phase 1 here, you have letter E, the rationale of curriculum review. One of the 3 points, the third point, you talk about career cruising.
Oh, yes.
Zello data from the matchmaker inventory. Could you talk about that process? Those numbers are very high, and what does that mean?
Sure.
It looks like there could be high interest is how I
Correct.
took that.
Yep. So what we did was career cruising which is now Zello, is the program that we use during academic and career planning. The Matchmaker is intended to have the students look at skills and interests, and it then aligns them to potential career pathways of interest. And from there, the students can either save them or keep them in a list. What we did was we logged into our version and pulled out all the careers that align with this pathway. For example, a baker, a caterer, things like that, and we looked at the numbers of students that matched those careers. And so that's where we got those high numbers. And again, that's part of the reason why we decided that this would be a next step for our culinary path.
So is this, is the Zello data collected or the Matchmaker inventory taken every year by every student, or what years is it performed?
For the most part, it's taken every year. Being that career cruising was new about 2 years ago, I would say everyone's took it within the last 2 years. And then when we switched to Zello again, they have retaken it since.
Okay.
So
those numbers are reflective of the entire populace of each high school?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. They're very high.
Yes. And that also, and these teachers can speak to the fact that the students are asking for this, not just us. It has, maybe in part to do with the crazy TV shows like the Great British Great Baking Show, right?
And stuff, yeah.
But that's not the only reason. So I don't know if you want to add to that at all, from what your students are saying.
Yes, I'm definitely, there's a huge interest in this. So we both teach chef foods as well as culinary arts, and in each of those classes we'll do a small unit on baking, and the student interest is so high, but there's so many other units to cover. So I think having this class as an option for them would be a huge asset for them and for us as a school district.
And there's more precision in baking, right? More mathematics and, precision.
Yeah.
So
And it also allows the students to have so many choices too, since we're all about being able to give those students a real life situation and decide, okay, what do I want to make? Do I want to make this cookie? Do I want to make this cookie? Does it fall in my requirement of my assignment? What can I do? And it allows them to have their student voice and choice, as well as that, I can build this, I can try this, I can try this, and they get that chance to, if the recipe flops, redesign.
excellent. Thank you.
So any other questions for us? Otherwise, we'll see you again next month. I promised you treats, but I failed
I
this
have one
month.
quick question. How does this sit with the health and wellness program we have?
Actually,
All
part of
organic.
this course proposal includes dietary adjustments for people that are gluten-free, that are sugar-free, that are dairy-free. So that's actually in there.
And I do know that if we make cookies at home, we can make them with less fat than we get them in the store.
Yeah, something about applesauce, I don't know. But I'm certain they'll try out some recipes on you, Bill.
Yes, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Baumgart's dating himself. There's nothing wrong with fat. Fat's a good thing.
Limited.
It's carbs you got to watch out for. Carbs and sugars.
Okay.
Anything else for our presenters? No? Okay, good.
you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
We'll see you next month.
Thank you. Have that back.
Okay, our next discussion item, middle school instructional minutes. We have Dan Kieser, Director of Secondary Learning here this evening, as well as our principals from our 3 middle schools, Rob Bennett from Les Paul Middle School, Bob Lesington from Horny Middle School, and also Jason Sadowski from Butler Middle School. And then I think we might have some staff members as well, but if our administrators could introduce, I would appreciate that. Okay. Welcome.
I'd like to introduce Jamie Wagner, 7th grade science teacher at Les Paul, and Sarah Vanden Heuvel, literacy teacher at Butler, our 2 teacher representatives who have been part of many of the scheduling discussions, some of the summer work in previous years that we've gone through, and we'll explain some of those things as we go through today. Before we get started, a couple of clarifications too as we go through the middle school instructional minutes piece. When we came in October, we were discussing some things that got mixed together, extending a school day instructional minute wise and reallocating instructional minutes. And to clarify, really looking at the purpose of today is a plan to address some of those student achievement issues, especially in 8th grade literacy, and how reallocating minutes could look, and taking away that proposal about adding minutes to a school day. due diligence being taken to look at costs, financial impact, and all of those things based on additional minutes would cause transportation issues, and in doing that due diligence anywhere from hundreds of thousands of dollars to $1 million based on some of those pieces. So we want to make sure and clarify it's separating those two pieces. That is not a discussion about extending the middle school day. And that was one thing we wanted to clarify. As we move through, to give you some background and history of where we are today and what we've come to, the history of middle school schedule changes. We've been in communication with the board many times over the course of the last 5-6 years based on middle school schedules. Starting back in April of 2015, some people were present on that board at that time. Some people were new. Some staff members are in different roles, different positions, and administratively some changes have come about. But being part of the middle school level for many, many years, we've seen many of the evolutions of the schedule and opportunities for students. As we go through, looking back to 2009, that was when one of the most impactful changes to middle school occurred in moving the sixth graders to the middle school. Looking at when they came out of the elementary level during that 2009 school year. During that time, 6th and 7th grade schedules differed from 8th grade schedules. When they came through to the middle school, they were in core areas for approximately 69 to 70 minutes in somewhat of a semi-block schedule, and their literacy was twice as long at that time compared to an 8th grade. Science and social studies were equal to a semester equivalent at that point, and we had a 6-week wheel exploration. 6-week units. Students in grades 6 and 7 experienced those 2 years of those wheel. 8th grade, all periods were the same length, and literacy at that point was a single class period. And they had 3 elective periods for choice, which was equal to 5 semesters over the course of the time, and a Phi-Ed. So Phi-Ed was a requirement, but it fit into that elective experience. As we started to look over the course of years, there were some changes in achievement scores. At that point, if you remember, it was WKCE and MAP were some of the standard measures to look at student achievement and what they were. From there, it changed to Badger, a year of transition, forward, exam, all of those pieces. And we also were looking at, during that 2016-17, some of our inefficiencies of 3 schedules. We had a 6th grade schedule, a 7th grade schedule, and an 8th grade schedule. And there were times that students who were accelerating in a content area, performance area, music area, they may be unable to access that due to 3 different distinct grade level schedules. Teachers could have been teaching multiple grade levels, and at this point we still do have that, but trying to eliminate to get back to a mid-level philosophy, giving that best opportunity for students. Art requirements in some cases may not have been met in 6th grade due to 9-week installments. If it was a 9-week installment that fell over a holiday break, a long duration of time, those limits could have occurred due to natural calendar events, which could have taken instructional days out of those terms. And science and social studies met in 6th and 7th grade was to meet for an entire year. At Les Paul, we did some things with the structure to ensure that it was from a September to a June opportunity to make that a year-long requirement. Other places were meeting that time frame over a semester course. And then the push for everyday science and social studies to make sure that students were having that opportunity through the duration. So students may not have been in science or social studies semester 1, miss out on semester 2, making adjustments to have that full year. One of the things, too, is trying to make a schedule alignment from 2016 to the present was the alignment of all 3 grades into one schedule. It created some flexibility, and we moved away from a 6th grade 6-week exploratory of 6 electives to 9-week experiences in 4 elective areas. This was helping meet requirements for art, world languages, based on what the board had wanted and worked for. And then students had the choice to take 2 other 9-week electives in 7th grade or a semester elective with 8th graders. And currently we have some multi-age settings in grades 7 and 8. And that also allowed 6th and 7th grade science and social studies to move to a full year. All of that work then led up to some of the most recent work, and I'm going to pass it over to Dan, which involves some extensive research on scheduling models, opportunities, and really consulting with many, many people to create what could be a best possible schedule opportunity.
So thanks, Rob. If that background kind of left you like, okay, which way were we going and which way are we heading now? You're kind of where I was when I first came here just about 4 years ago. So when I came in 2016, shortly after I was here for that December 2016 board presentation and was involved with conversations around scheduling. Yes, I am one of those people who likes to put together schedules. I did it at the high school level, and so my brain kind of orients this way. But it was very quick to say that we as a district are so close to the conversation and to the work that it really needed to have a facilitator that had eyes and expertise within this field that could help isolate what are the key points that as a middle school group they're trying to address. And so Michael Rettig, if you don't know the name, he's a professor who has done scheduling work at elementary, middle, and high school all over the world. I've worked with him on a couple of different occasions in a few districts, and his mind is very interesting. You could have a conversation like we are right now, and he'll have 4 different schedules in front of you in that amount of time. So we invested at the district level in bringing him in as an external evaluator and facilitator for the middle school group. So each of the principals sent out emails to their staff and trying to get a cross-representation of staff to attend a 2-day workshop in August of 2018. They sent it to staff who taught in regular ed classes, special ed classes, EL, core, encore, counselors, administrators, and so forth. What you see up there are people who were in attendance during the conversations, and if you go to the next iteration, this mess is not so that...
Could you go back? I just wanted to look at the names
Sure,
a little bit more.
absolutely.
Thank you.
So I'll continue. So what you'll see as we go through, Michael Rettig talked with us over 2 days and gave us a whole lot of background information and also pressed us as an organization that said, okay, what are your constraints? Your start time, your end time. Are those things that are fixed or are those things that are flexible? How much of your time is dedicated to the 4 core classes? How much of your time is dedicated to your other core classes? Are you a school district who's looking for a middle school model? Are you a middle school looking for a junior high model? All of those things are iterations of things that the team has talked about in its history between moving from wheel to now not the wheel, to elective courses, to structured elective courses. The goal of this is that we, as a team, during those 2 days, listed all of the things that we liked and disliked about the middle school experience from a scheduling standpoint, and what are the priorities that we would like to address. He pushed everyone there to prioritize that list for themselves, and what this shows is what came out of that. We went through a matrix where every person had a vote. We had to rank them. We did not have to justify our rankings, but on the next screen, this is what came out of all that work. The top 5 priority areas, as deemed by the team that was out there, was in rank order, these 5 areas. And so this has been the pieces that the middle school principals have been talking with staff beginning last year in August and moving through trying to address each of these areas, which happens to align with the work that at the district level you've been working with Todd Gray and the cabinet team. So if I turn it over to Jason, you talk a little bit more about some of those areas.
So, and that kind of leads us, is one of the things that he left us off is as a team is we had to make some choices on priorities of, I can give you a bunch of schedules, but unless you tell me what the percentage of, yes.
Turn on my microphone first of all. Go back to that previous slide, would you please?
Yeah.
When I look at those 5 things, I mean, there are things that if I was to pre-guess what the 5 things would be, those would probably be the 5 things I would pre-guess to. But you would also think that parents would say, I want my children to have plenty of youth options and youth opportunities. And maybe educators wouldn't be that much into that in this particular forum, but it didn't show up on this anyway as part of their priorities.
This isn't one of those things. This wasn't about how many periods we were. This is more about the structure of the schedule versus electives versus core. It wasn't that kind of conversation. It was about how do we format this schedule and what are some top priorities that lead to providing education into the classroom at the highest quality that we can have. So for instance, if you look at the top 2, teaming and common planning time, those are essential in education, period. When we get into, and that's kind of what leads me into this next piece, is he let us off to say I'm not going to make a decision on how many elective periods you should have or how many core periods. He goes, that's something that your team has to decide. And that's kind of what's leading us to now, is we have to make a decision before we can move forward on any kind of schedule that we put in front of our teachers. And one of the things, and this isn't something that we all of a sudden, as you notice, that was 2 summers ago. So that was back in 18. We've been going through this for over a year and a half, looking at the different aspects, trying different things. And what it comes down to is now we have to kind of put forth a decision, and based off our data that we've been looking at here, is our data for our literacy has been trending down. So and just to kind of give you an idea of what this graph looks like, if you look at that 2018-19 grouping there, that's a 6th grader. That's that same group of students as a 6th grade in blue, as a 7th grader in red, and as an 8th grader in yellow. Okay, so you see, in 7th grade we were able to jump up, but then 8th grade we go down, and this is in literacy. And you look at the group before that. Now, 7th grade went down a little bit, but then 8th grade went down even further. So this is the challenge that we come across when we look at the data pieces. And going back to what Rob was saying with the WKCE data, this isn't like we were going in a positive direction before. We were flatlining before, and we were below the state average. And now here we're declining when we get, when we're dropping to 8th grade.
Explain that chart to me again, please. I don't quite understand it.
So I'm just isolate on the 2018-19 group there. That's the group that were all 8th graders in our district. Or not in our district, in Horning, Butler, and Les Paul. Just that group alone. Okay, so that was that group when they were 6th graders. 38% of that group scored proficient or advanced. That group as 7th graders, 39.3% scored proficient advanced. But then in 8th grade, they dropped to 32.7.
Go over those numbers again. I'm not quite gathering it. Try it again for me.
So if you think, and I'll just try to explain it slightly differently. Each grouping of bars is one group of students. So it's the same students in all 3 bars. In the far right bar, that 2018-2019, are all the same students. They took a snapshot of their forward data in 6th grade, which is represented by blue. Them again a year later as 7th graders, that's in red, and then them again as 8th graders last year.
I'm still maybe.
So you're following the same group of students.
Which group is which? Because
year to year.
You got red. Is that the same group of students?
So if you look at so just look at the dates underneath, the year dates. The 2016-17, those are our current juniors. 2017-18, those are our current sophomores. And 2018-19, those are our current freshmen. Now, the reason why in 16-17 we don't have a blue there, because there was no forward there was no forward test when they were in 6th grade. So just think of blue is in 6th grade, red is in 7th grade, and yellow is in 8th grade.
You just said sophomore, juniors.
That's where they're currently at now. So the 18-19 group, that was last year's 8th graders.
And yellow.
Okay? That whole group. So that's their scores when they were in the 6th grade. The following year in 7th grade was red. The following year in 8th grade is yellow.
I think it'll help me better understand if I ask you the question.
Okay.
Okay? I'm looking at yellow.
Mm-hmm.
Yellow 2016, 2017, yellow 2017, 2018, and yellow 2018, 2019. Is that the same group of kids year to year?
That is not the same group. These
Okay,
are three different groups of kids.
Okay.
All in it, but that's
Okay, now, you got that point across. How do I look at the same group of kids going from 16, 17, and 18? What do I look at?
You just look at one under 1 year.
Which bar, which what?
1 year. Just look at 1 year.
So look at the very right stack, the 3 stack, the blue stack, red stack, yellow stack.
Can I go up to the screen?
Yeah, it might help.
So
I'm just not getting it. I'm not saying anything's wrong. I'm just not getting it.
I understand.
And I think we've heard two things here.
Okay, so if I was a student, and let's say I was a freshman, I'm a freshman now. This was where I was in 6th grade. This is where I was in 7th grade. This is where I was in 8th grade.
Okay, so that's the group of
This is
students.
the group right here.
That's one group of students, same group in that block.
This is one group. This is a separate group. And then
That's
this
the
is another
sophomores.
group. And what we're seeing is this group. So my group went up in 7th grade, but went down in 8th grade.
Okay.
My brother's group, who's older than me, went down in 7th grade and then went further down in 8th grade.
Okay, but this doesn't, I mean, okay, now I know what the data represents up there, okay? But when I look at that, I'm not seeing much of a drop-off except for your 8th graders are deciding, I mean, I'm seeing consistency for 2 straight years and then suddenly they drop off in 8th grade. And I'm not saying that would be, you can't really say that's related to a literacy training problem in 8th grade. It could be just how 8th grades are testing at that point in time, after 3 years of testing.
Well,
it could be test bias, right?
I wouldn't necessarily go there because there's a distinct difference in the instruction that's happening in 8th grade versus 6th and 7th grade.
Yeah, but you're using this data to say this is something that's a problem, but I'm not sure if it's not simply because they're 8th graders and they're tired of taking tests. I mean, that could be the case, right?
I'm not saying that's not the case, but
there are a lot of factors. And it's going down, so the seniors were better off than the juniors, than the sophomores, or the freshmen, sophomores.
Mm-hmm.
So it's going down over that period of time, over 3 years too, right? So we have to look at it that way, down even more. So our juniors are better off than our sophomores, and our sophomores were a little bit better off than our freshmen.
See, I don't.
That is that a significant trend or not? Does that play out as a significant trend?
we don't have enough data to kind of, because this is really the only group of data we have with the forward exam. So to kind of go for a long trend, I would say we're more kind of flatline, but the drop from 7th and 8th grade that's the area of concern for us.
Okay.
I just don't get how kids would go from being good readers to being bad readers. You're either a good reader or you're not a good reader by the time you're in 8th grade. I mean, it's not like you're going to decline because of a lack of training in 8th grade.
Well, the other part is that the test isn't like the same test through that whole thing. There's a different level of the rigor of the test when going from 6th grade to 7th grade to 8th grade.
I can only say that I was a good reader when I was in 1st grade, 2nd grade, 3rd grade, and it never dropped off. So once you become a good reader, you're a good reader. It's getting to the good reader point that's the challenge. And what we're saying here is that we have a percentage of people who got to the good reader, and for some reason, if we're going to believe the test scores, they became non-good readers in 8th grade, and that makes no sense.
There's no doubt in your fact that there are a multitude of factors that are playing into the decision. When with Reddick, as Jason had shared, is only talking about the structure of the schedule. What you do within that structure of the schedule and what is assigned to that is the conversation that is really at heart here, right? So the idea of are we a middle? Is the philosophy at 6, 7, and 8 a middle school model? the junior high model. Junior high model acts like high school with certain exceptions because state law mandates certain courses being taught every year or within the grade band. In high school, you have similar type situations, but you have a lot more flexibility. And so when you think of a junior high model, you're giving a lot of flexibility to the students in terms of, I'm going to take this class, I'm not going to take that class. Districts, in fact, we've been getting bombarded with emails around districts looking at what choices in core elective areas are they going to offer at middle schools or not at middle schools. What this team is talking about is they're seeing stronger data historically when they were at a middle school model. And so the middle school model is built around exploration. So the idea of having core instruction uniform across the 3 grade levels is the message that they are talking about. When Align by Design first came to this district, and I'm speaking from history, so I'm absolutely open to being corrected. The decision at 8th grade was to say 8th grade is closer to high school than it is to middle school, so we're going to treat it like high school. And so they modeled the structure of 8th grade after 9th grade, not after 6th and 7th grade, because they were already pretending that 8th grade was going to be high school. And what the discussion and the proposal is that 8th grade is still middle school. It should look and feel like middle school, and so it should follow the middle school model. The middle school model is 5 periods of the day dedicated to the 4 core areas, and the rest of the periods, the other 2 periods, are dedicated to the encore and the elective areas. And now that's the middle school model that is
So are we a little of both right now?
We are a little bit of both.
So we're
treating 8th graders like they're already in high school by the way we structure their day and expect them to handle themselves, as opposed to saying that they've been in 2 years of having a certain structure and wanting to continue that structure all the way through their middle school experience.
Did the process that you went through a year and a half ago with Dr. Redding, did you get into middle school versus junior high? And what kind of came out of that? I mean, obviously it's probably came out to go towards the middle school, but can you kind of take us through that?
I can certainly...
At least the high level points.
Certainly do my best to summarize. So Dr. Reddick is a facilitator of the conversation, okay? His goal is not to propose one or another. In fact, what was shared a year ago was that we had like 4 scheduling models. What was key based on those priorities was that teaming, which is a middle school model philosophy, was the #1 priority and was the one that led to Horning's Haas model. That's a teaming model. And the idea that our students who are still growing and developing as 8th graders need to experience choice and flexibility structured, because too much choice and flexibility causes us paralysis by analysis, right? So the goal that the team is putting forward is that there's a misalignment in 6th and 7th grade in the number of periods that are dedicated to the 4 core areas as compared to 8th grade, and that's something that they feel, and that I've been supporting them in the facilitation of that discussion around what would be best. The discussion is not about, and I want to acknowledge the conversations that happened last month and this month with comments and the conversations out in the school district about elective areas, there's still every elective area that is there. And the intent of the conversations the principals are having with their staff is to have structured choice. Not go back to the wheel where it was 6 weeks and it was all survey and not as much depth, but certainly not as much flexibility as that the students would have when they're freshmen and high schoolers and they have to choose amongst all of the department areas and all of the choices within that. So there has to be a hybrid in the middle. What that looks like is something that the principals and their staff have to engage in that dialogue and debate. And so what's being proposed is saying, as a middle school team, the feeling is the middle school model is the best model moving forward that best addresses not only those priority areas, but they feel through their work and their SAIL work is going to also address this literacy gap, which is part of the board goals and objectives in terms of what, as an entity, the district is expecting of all of its students.
Thank you. I appreciate that kind of general top down. I don't necessarily spend my time thinking middle school versus junior high, so.
This is interesting. I appreciate your comments about the middle school versus the junior high school concept, and the fact that we apparently have slipped the 8th grade into try to get more high school transition type stuff. One of the things we have talked about at the board level, though more than once, is that our abilities, or not ability, wrong word, how well the job we're doing of transitioning the elementary kids into middle school, or whatever it is, and the middle school kids into high school, which would claim that the 8th grade should be considered as a 8th grade rather than a middle school. And I don't necessarily agree with that, but I'm just wondering if we go back to creating the 8th grade as a middle school grade, are we losing any of the transitional processes we're going to use when the kid goes in to become a freshman at high school? Or how do we make that still available? Do you see? Am I making any sense?
You're making perfect sense, and you know, if I'll go back to it, and it's definitely a cliche. If it was as simple as being able to say there was one right schedule for middle, elementary, and high, we would have figured that out. We would be implementing. The reality is the transitions are always messy, they're always difficult, and they're always filled with our best intentions that never quite hit every single student.
But at the same time, with what you're telling us about, let's getting back to the middle school concept, which is what's missing on the yellow bars. What you're saying is maybe reverting to the middle school for 8th graders will help that yellow bar go up? That's what you're trying to tell us? Okay, thank you.
Can I also say that our conclusion to this isn't just based off of this information right here.
I'm sure it isn't.
And if you don't mind, I just want to go through a couple more things to give you a little bit more background and rationale why we're going through there. If you want to, you can go ahead.
I just got to get just give me Mr. Bennett. You have all this long-term historical institutional knowledge which has gone back for some period of time.
For 2 decades.
I remember as we went through budget cuts and the House concept, and I think it was A, B, and C, and that was what my children went through at Central at the time, back when we called it only Central. We didn't call it Les Paul back then. And I remember how we always had put up for budget cuts, eliminating the House concept. And at that time, it was 7th and 8th grade. We didn't have 6th grade in the middle school.
Correct.
So it's more like a junior high because we only had 7th and 8th grade there. We didn't have 6th grade. But I think it was a middle school model. It was a House concept. Would you say the House concept was what we'd call teaming in this discussion?
Yeah, so what we're trying to do is build, with the team, the House concept, it allows also for flexibility and reallocation of minutes. We can reduce transitions, which gain back instructional minutes. We can reduce all of our add-ons, ACP, SEL, all those pieces which are extremely valuable, and going to that team middle level model, those can be reallocated within our core instruction. So we're getting back minutes to provide to the instruction of core areas. So when you're thinking about taking something away, it's how do you reallocate to best meet the needs of students? A lot of the group that was in that summer meeting really talked about that mid-level teaming. How can you utilize minutes the best?
You're going a little bit faster than what I need to go right now, Rob, because I'm just trying to understand the historical part of it.
Yeah, so and I'll speak just from that institutional knowledge of Central and Les Paul. Before we made a large-scale shift to a junior high model, our scores had increased for 5 years in a row in math and language arts. 5 straight years, one of 32 schools in the state to do so. We made a shift away from that in grade 8, which there are a lot of factors too, which we've all talked about tonight. But since that, there was a gap of transition from WKCE to Badger to Forward, so there wasn't data. But since that point, speaking for Les Paul, our scores have declined. We are still higher than many areas, but for our building, that's not good enough. And for any building in the district, it is not good enough to see the decline. So looking at how do we address those pieces by looking at some reallocation of instructional minutes. The middle level model, the house model, team model can reduce transitions, gives kids more time in the classroom.
Again, I'm not, that's taking a little bit faster than I want to take it. I'm trying to get some, I'm trying to get some, because this is an important decision, right? So let's just help me understand it better. When we talk about the house model that we had way back when, that you're well aware of, which not everybody else is.
Correct.
We never, as a board, we always kind of refused to cut that because the feedback from the educators was they wanted the teaming element, that was what they felt made their system much more successful when they went to the house model, and they never wanted to see it disappear.
Right. And that was one of those 5 points that was up before.
And then we went ahead and let it disappear at the push of administration at the time. Didn't come from the teachers, it came from administration. And I think everything that the teachers warned about happened because we lost that teaming approach that we had and went to something else, right? But I recall when we had that teaming model, what we called the house system way back when, I don't recall a lot of junior high stuff going on at the middle schools back then. It was just a very rich middle school environment.
Correct.
Would you agree with that? It was a very rich middle school environment. It was rich.
We were together in that time frame, so we can both be old.
We had all the music options. We had elementary orchestra. And our scores were good. But they were good coming out of elementary into the middle school, and you guys had these kids for 2 years, and it was a transitional period really from elementary to high school. But we had a rich middle school concept. And since that time, we've had all this other stuff that you guys are familiar with changes, which I haven't paid much attention to, because once it went from the house system to all these other things, I was focusing on F&F. So I'm just trying to get a grasp for where we're going here, why we're going here, but what I don't want to see, us doing something again without engaging our teachers, right?
Right.
And I'm not so sure that we have our teachers engaged yet. Now, that's my concern right now, okay? So we got to make sure that we're going back to the richness. If going back to richness as a middle school concept with teaming is the way to get there, the literacy stuff isn't a selling point for me because I don't trust the scores up there right now. I mean, they just don't make sense to me. But if we can improve the educational quality opportunity, this is not a literacy improvement strategy. This is this should be an educational richness improvement strategy that we should be going down, in my mind. Literacy, there's a 123-page slideshow on literacy from the state of Wisconsin, and they talk about everything we probably should be doing in the elementary schools that leads up into the, through the K through 12 level. If we're not doing it right in elementary, you won't have those 41s, 40s, and 38s. But if we are doing right, you'll have 50s, 55s, and 55s coming into your school. And then we can worry about declines into the 33s and 39 levels. But we should be sending you much better prepared children. And then when they hit your middle school, they should be hitting a rich environment that has language, music, art. I don't want to see any of that go away because we're chasing literacy, which should have been accomplished in the earlier grades. That should have been our focus.
And Mr. O'Brien, I would totally agree with you is that literacy is not just taught in literacy. And I would say that our teachers from literacy all the way through all of our other core areas as well as our electives, they are all teaching literacy right now. And I would say they've been doing that for years. And every year they look at ways to improve that. It's not a matter, and that's it. Our teachers are working their butts off, all of them. And I feel like that's one of the things is we're not providing the structure that they need to improve. When we first introduced this priority to our teachers, I had some teachers come up to me in tears like, I'm failing our students, but I don't know what else I can do. Because this is what the scores are resulting in. And that, as a leader, that's telling me that there's some structures that we have to look at and to change because we're implementing and we're trying to do things with fidelity as much as we can. Our teachers are doing that with fidelity as much as we can. So that's why we're taking a deeper look at, is this the instruction that's happening in class, or is this the structures we're providing for our teachers? And that's where we're coming from, I guess, is more of what it is. Our teachers are, I don't want to lose one of my teachers. And I've been busting my butt since I've been there not to lose any of the teachers at Butler. So this is not about that. Obviously, it's not ever about that. But I want them all. I want them all to have a job. But I'm also looking at my number one priority as a leader is making sure that our students are prepared for high school and beyond. And right now, I can't. Looking at the scores up there, I don't feel comfortable with that, of what we're producing. And as I kind of go through here, and that's what kind of leads me to this slide here. And I kind of mentioned before, it's not just that data, just not that, the forward is like, oh my gosh, we have some problems here. But one of the things you challenged us to do is look at what are other districts doing? And when you look at this and we're comparing ourselves to neighboring districts around the area and districts that are similar size, all of them have a lot less electives, and I'll say equivalent semesters, because somebody like Muskego and Elmbrook, students will have 5 electives, but they're only for 9 weeks. They're not for 18 full weeks. So you can't really count that as if you put that for us, we would have 10 electives that way. So I'm counting just at semester electives that we're looking at. And so you can see the scores that are aligned there. And I'm just taking Horning, Butler, and Les Paul because that's the only group that we're talking about here. But then you compare them with the forward scores and then the number of electives. And it's not like, well, this is the reason. And I'll to be straight off. The number of electives is not flat out the reason why our scores are that way. I just want to be straight with that. That's not the end-all, be-all. But it does not put us in a good competitive place when the literacy, when we're not able to do what we want to do in 8th grade literacy with fidelity because we don't have enough time in there. And that's what we're kind of coming forward with. When you look at across the board, a lot of the districts, it varies on how much time is allocated for literacy in there. Many of these, if they have, I think it ranges from 60 minutes all the way to 110 minutes of the ranges. So it's all over the place. Their schedules are all over the place of what they produce. There's a number of them that they offer some sort of like everyday, whether they call it homeroom or they call it a common area where the kids have a place that they go for anywhere from 25 minutes to 44 minutes. I think one of the districts had it. So there's a lot of variations in the different things. And those are things that we need to look at as well. But one of the pieces,
I would say, though, that those other schools don't come in, their kids don't come in with 38 and 39% numbers. They come in with 45 and 50% numbers, right? They're getting better prepared in the elementary school. I'm not blaming it on the teachers. I'm not blaming it on administration, but just say the numbers that they come in with. You're showing us a one-year number, which happens to be your worst numbers, right? Your 8th grade numbers.
Correct.
I don't know what their grade numbers are. They may have just came in with 50% or maybe they came in with 60 and declined. I don't know. So it doesn't, and you've been trying to say that you're not trying to just justify this on that, and I'm trying to say I'm okay with that, that you're not trying to just justify it on that. I'm okay with the teaming and the broader and richer experience. But the literacy thing doesn't sell for me. It just doesn't. I want literacy, but I think it's a deeper dive than just looking at 8th grade literacy in our middle schools.
In the other pieces, the board has challenged us to raise our forward scores. In this upcoming year, the expectation is for 77.5%. And right now, we're not even halfway there. So it's a broader picture, and I guess this is the reality, and this is the pressure that we feel is with those kind of goals. We've got to look at something different here. So we're far from it, and that's kind of where that's where a lot of this is coming from. Is these are the expectations we have on our school, both as administration, as our teachers feel that pressure as well. So, like I said, as a leader, we're looking at some sort of different structures that we need to put in place.
So a couple things I want to add here, because that is the end of your slide deck, correct?
No, we have
we got a couple more.
Oh, you do?
Yeah.
All right. Well, as you're progressing too, I want the board to think about this. So as a discussion item, right, the job of the board continues to be to ask the critical questions to this team so that they can go back and prepare next month as well for the action item. I want to take advantage of Jamie and the teachers that we have too, for the board to feel free to ask questions of, again, just reminding that this is the time and place for the discussion to make sure that we're all on the same page with that.
Mr. Como.
Could you go back to the board goals, please?
Yeah.
So we had a pretty extensive discussion on this the last couple of years as a board. And one of the things that we struggled with our discussion was a lot of times we want to talk about our kids at grade level. This is not our kids at grade level. This is addressing the forward exam. And, and we talked to Dr. Gray on that too. So whatever our measurements are, I mean, we decided to stick with these, but I don't necessarily think that, and I can have my fellow board members chime in here. I think our parents think in terms is my child at grade level. They don't think in terms of forward scores. Now, I don't know, I don't want to throw another monkey wrench into this, but there are different ways of measuring. And I'm just going to leave it at that. The board decided on the goals. That's what we need to shoot for. But I wanted you to understand that there was a broader discussion before we decided on what those were.
Correct. A lot of discussion about that. And we also understood, I think in our conversations that we talked about work in process and so on and so forth. Mm-hmm. And we even talked about, are we applying a pressure that's wrong word. Are we applying the pressure at a level that's not fair because we can understand you're not going to get there in a year?
Right.
And we had some discussion about that, and I don't know if we resolved even our discussion. But I think at least we've got people thinking about the fact that we've got some improvement that we should shoot for. Nobody disagrees with the fact that we should find some improvement in here. And I think the fact that what I've been hearing here is, in a summary, is that the structure is more important than anything else we're talking about right now because we've had the wrong structure in place. And that's what I'm picking up as my lead thing. And maybe, you're not going to get up to 77.5 by next June, I don't think. If you do, fine. We'll celebrate. But if you can continue working and getting that a structure that is more positive, the wrong word, more likely to be positive and work better, because to me there was clear evidence in the yellow bars. Kurt and I were seeing from a different viewpoint, I guess, but the yellow bars told me that we're doing something wrong at 8th grade.
And I think, Mr. Baumgart, what you're saying goes back to Mr. O'Brien's comment that I went deeper into, is that structure, and going back to a structure that allowed us flexibility for reallocation of time to meet needs and still offer electives and offer those rich experiences that were a true mid-level, and still give high-quality instruction and teachers opportunities to plan together, work together, build relationships with each other in order to have a broader impact to utilize the data that is coming and utilize multiple measures beyond just a forward score, but a classroom performance score, a student indicator, a parent feedback, but having flexibility to look at how an instructional day takes place, to create that structure, to deliver curriculum with fidelity based on timing, based on curricular standards, instructional practice, and all of those pieces we're being charged with to measure and to monitor and to communicate those celebrations or opportunities to grow. And when we looked at 39, 40% and trying to grow to a 77%, I so appreciate, and I think the teachers in the room appreciate, that pressure they're all feeling to try to do that in our current structure. And one of the things we get asked is, what support do we need to be able to make those changes, because changes are uncomfortable. Our teachers, our administrators are using data more than ever, daily. Sometimes it's not always communicated the greatest. Some miscommunication or not quite knowing, questions still linger. But when you see, as Jason said, and what teachers are doing day to day in their classrooms to have the best impact on kids is unmatched. And that effort is superhero. And the structure to make them a superhero is very difficult. And we need to change that structure.
Mr. Bryan.
Yeah, look, I think what we are in agreement on is trying to come up with a richer environment that's going to improve educational outcomes, okay? And I think we're also in agreement that we're not trying to create pressure that's undue at the wrong pressure points, which I think is part of the problem here. Can't take the middle school and make that the focus, especially one grade level, one set of scores, as how we're going to solve our problems here. It starts way down much beyond. When you talk about the decline in test scores, there's a whole bunch of other things that happened besides changing what we did at the middle schools. I mean, we went to grading for learning, where we eliminated homework and parents are less involved in their kids because their kids don't have to do homework anymore. Homework doesn't count anymore. We went to, iPads and which I think should have helped us. We went to dual language, affecting some of our community schools. Our demographics changed. There's a whole list of things that has nothing to do with the middle school changes that we've had. Doesn't mean that we shouldn't make the changes to improve. But to say that this is all on the middle schools is where I really struggle. It's not. And we need to dig far deeper than just saying, let's increase instructional minutes in 8th grade. I can see where Rob did a good job of selling me when I didn't want to be sold yet. But, the point being is that literacy doesn't cut it for me in this particular analysis, because the data to me is not strong enough. And I know you guys, look, there's no way when a child comes in and you test, let's say we're testing four, we'll say 5 to make the math easier. 5 of our children out of 10 are testing fine. And then the next year, one of those children out of 10 doesn't test fine anymore. That doesn't make any sense, right? Literacy is something you build upon year in, year after year. So I'm not buying the data on literacy. I am buying the idea of making it a better middle school environment, a better teaching environment, but I want it to be rich. right? I don't want us to lose more than what we've already lost over the years. I'm more inclined to say, as I did at WASB, Luther Olson was there, and he's talking about trying to change our test scores, and they're talking about forward test scores statewide being down. He says you got to start one grade at a time. And the grade you have to start with is usually 4-year-old kindergarten or 5-year-old kindergarten, and you just work your way up until you get there. He says it's not going to happen in 1 year, it's going to take 8.
And
we're not going to see some sudden change in performance here from anything we do in the middle school.
And I agree, and I think part of our work is a problem half solved is a problem identified. And we've identified a problem, and we're trying to solve that, and to be able to identify some of those problems, and one of those being that piece specifically, we have a better chance to solve a problem when we've been able to identify it. And that's the continued work of the group, to identify, are there underlying root causes even beyond?
Mr. Como.
I want to hop back to the goals real quick. On the forward exam, it's advanced, proficient, and then the next one, is that basic?
Basic.
Basic, and then what's the last one? Minimal? So there's the 4. When we talk in ancient language of at grade level, what do you think grade level is when considering?
Proficient.
So advanced and proficient, basic is not grade level?
Basic is not grade level.
Okay. You guys all in agreement with that, or is that one opinion?
Basic is foundational skills in order to be proficient at a grade level.
For what we use in Waukesha, proficient and advanced is
Okay, appreciate that.
And to build off of the conversation, and it's been great listening to everyone speak. The problem identified, to your point, Mr. O'Brien, in regards to, there's a lot of pieces that you've brought up, and all of those pieces need to be addressed. In front of tonight is a group of administrators who are saying, trying to be as transparent as ultimately possible, saying we believe that we want that richness, and honoring the history that has happened. This shift from where you were when you were a part of the middle school conversation, that richness you talk about is the richness they want to establish. But take a look at all of the growth and opportunities that have come with the work that has been done. Our CTE, our world languages, our elective areas would not have gone through the transformation. All of those pieces would not have existed if this journey that they are describing did not occur. And the intentional work that they want to do is to not create unintentional consequences of losing those things. With every change, there is going to be adjustments, and there are going to be things that are going to go up, things that are going to go down, but overall, those individual changes should add to the overall whole, is what I think you were saying. And to the point that this team is know that if we need to make an adjustment, this is the adjustment, and this is where it's going to go. But knowing that the conversation still has yet to come to fruition and conclusion within each of the 3 buildings, as a staff and a leader, saying what is it work for us. They have collectively said a non-negotiable for them is to be uniform across the 3 schools for a whole host of reasons, traveling teachers, staff, families, and all of that. None of that should get lost, nor should all of the growth and opportunities that have been afforded to our students and our staff through the changes that have occurred should be lost in the discussion. But nonetheless, the conversations around making the middle school model a reality and coming back to some of that richness, knowing that is, at this point, what is felt is going to make the adjustments based on what was perceived by us up until now. What what the board goals represented. They represented benchmarks targets that we want to hit. We're all individuals. Everyone in this room. You give us a target. We're going to do our darndest to hit it. To your point, Mr. Como, around perhaps there are other ways to look at it. If we look at a profile of a graduate, what is it that as a community we want our Waukesha graduates to look, sound, act, feel, be like? Is a whole conversation, because you're absolutely right. That represents one narrow facet of our students, but it's also a facet that gets publicized, and rightfully so. As elected officials, you're trying to make sure that we represent well, right? And this team's going to do its darndest to make sure that we represent well, because that's what we do in Waukesha. We show up and we represent well. Our students go to state and they represent well. Our students, we will work till the end of whatever, so that our students will represent well, socially, emotionally, academically. That's why this team is being upfront and asking and saying, middle school model is where they want to move to. The data doesn't resonate with everyone. And if there is something that would be more resonating with people, that they will bring that. And most importantly is the permission to go back to their staff and make sure that they have those discussions, so that they can make sure that the richness continues to grow.
And that's your next step, right? Is to go back and collect that information and share and debate and discuss.
And that's been ongoing at sites throughout the process.
Your turn.
So I'm going to attempt to bring this all together, hopefully. So first of all, this has been a really interesting experience in some ways the last couple months going through this, but I really appreciate all the scrutiny and time that's gone into this particular decision. I think in my opinion, it's a very modest move. It's an intermediate step that we're taking. It doesn't address everything, but really, to recap, we're trying to address some achievement areas in the areas of math and ELA. And to what I heard from Mr. O'Brien is this goes much deeper. So the second bullet point on there is really talking about reallocating that instructional time to core instruction. So as we look at the next slide, really the proposal is to be consistent with what we currently have with 6th and 7th grade. Essentially, if you think of a class period, we want to devote the same amount of time that we have with our 6th and 7th grade as we look to perfect that middle school experience. Speaking from experience at my site, I'm excited to share some data next week in terms of the improvement. I know some of that data is embargoed till next week. The proof's in the pudding and some of the work we've done at Horning with that. But most importantly, I really respect what some of my colleagues spoke earlier. They spoke of passion in a place of advocating for electives. We're here to advocate for our teachers, but also our kids and some of our most marginalized students. There is an issue that we need to address in 8th grade that is really a small step. Is it going to correct everything? No, but it's something that really we need to take this step on. It's a small step in the right direction. So as I look at to recap all this, really a reallocation of instructional minutes in 8th grade. So really from increasing that from 57 to 71, and that number may sound large, but it's one class period. Okay, so really, as we look at the comprehensive literacy model, and I have an opportunity to see literacy unfold at the high school level, at the elementary, we're seeing some really good things with CLM. There's a disconnect with what happens in 8th grade with our current literacy model. Okay, so we need to make that small tweak to correct that immediately. And when we talk about the reduction of elective, I think it's modest. It's not a serious decision we take lightly. But looking at area district, it's a modest proposal. And we know that the deeper dive, Mr. O'Brien, needs to continue, and it will continue. But this is a step that we need to take on behalf of the students that we serve in this school district. So I appreciate everyone's time, and as we look to really perfect that middle school Haas middle school experience, and we're not a junior high, and I think that's really important. So all of us really appreciate the time and attention that's gone into this and the conversation. I know the teachers that we have here would also be happy to answer any questions that you have as well.
Sarah, can you talk about Sarah Vanden Heuvel? She's a teacher at Butler, 8th grade teacher at Butler. Just a little history on Sarah. She's taught 6th, 7th, and 8th grade, both at Butler and Horning middle schools. And so she's got an excellent perspective of what's needed at each of the grade levels. So Sarah, if you could talk a little bit about that.
No pressure. Just kidding. This year I'm actually in a really interesting place because I start my morning with a 7th grade block class. So I see them for 2 hours, and then they go away to lunch, and I have lunch too. And then I have 3 sections of 8th grade in the afternoon. And so it's a really interesting process because with my 7th grade, we have the luxury of time. We have time to do all the language workshops. We have time to sit and confer, which is like the heart of everything that we do. We have the time to do small groups that are flexible, that are based on, the ASW process. We have the luxury of all of that time. And with my 8th graders, we do the very best that we can to try to duplicate that experience because CLM is the model that's also in 8th grade. But I'll be honest with you, the piece that goes right out the door, generally speaking, is that conferring piece. And it's so challenging as a teacher. My work wife, if you will, we plan everything together. We use the same slides. We are very conscious about trying to give our kids the same experience because we know that that's really important. There have been some opportunities in 8th grade, for instance, we have different pathways for the CLM model. So in 7th grade, they maybe have 4 language workshops in a unit. In 8th grade, we've adjusted that because of the time to just have the 2. And then we try to base whatever, strategies and skills that we're teaching on those 2 mentor texts instead. And we're really trying, to hit everything and do everything that we can. But this is challenging because I really do believe literacy occurs in all of the classes. But boy, if there was the luxury of a little bit more time with those kids in 8th grade to really get to know them even more deeply as readers and writers and to say that I'm really helping them in the areas that they need, I really think it would have a positive effect. But I know that implies that maybe that's the only place that learning would be happening. And I know it isn't, but I know in keeping with the CLM model, that conferring piece is really crucial. And that is unfortunately the piece that takes the hit for us when we look at what we have to try to accomplish with kids.
Mr. O'Brien.
Okay. The other part of the problem with when we talk about shifting instructional time from elective to core, which I think is what we're talking about in 8th grade. I don't think let's not sugarcoat that. That's what you're saying. You want to shift instructional time from elective to core. What about the child that doesn't need more core literacy instructional time? All of a sudden, he doesn't have access to the electives. He's spending more time in core literacy, and he or she, that time isn't as useful to them as having the elective available to them. How do we answer that child?
Every student is challenged to the next level. So, and that's the great part about the comprehensive literacy model, is that students, they're always challenged. So, so part of the groupings is that they have choice books and they have groups that they can talk about or common books that they can talk with their peers about at their grade level. So if they're within the 8th grade, it's very tough to do because you don't have that allocated time to do that. Where in this 7th, 6th, and 7th grade, students are able to do that with that flexibility. Yeah, so and you talked about kids dropping from the proficient, from proficient down to basic. That just doesn't happen. Well, the reason why that happens is because every year the bar keeps on going higher and higher for grade level. But like Mr. Como said, what is grade level? Well, that keeps on rising high. And what happens is some students, they get to, they hit 7th grade or whatever grade level. Well, the next grade they're just at the same grade level. It's not like they go necessarily lower. It's just they don't go up. And that's what we're seeing in 8th grade, is they're not meeting that next benchmark.
That doesn't answer my question. I mean, you're doing is you're continuing to make your argument for why you want to do this, but what about that child? Are we going to be able to say they're going to have the same opportunities for electives after this change that they did before this change? And I think you're telling me no, that we may not be able to offer French anymore because we've taken away those instructional minutes and there's not enough time to have enough people for a French class. Is that what we're saying?
No, that's not, because that's something that we also talked about, is we'll have to look on how we restructure so we make sure that our numbers don't drop too low that we can't run certain courses.
So the better answer for me that I'm much more comfortable with is that you're going to find ways to accommodate so we don't lose that richness of opportunity for children.
Correct.
So
that's the answer I'm looking for.
Yeah, so on the bottom bullet there, that's one of the pieces there, is restructure elective in the middle school so that we do not have that that opportunity. And that's where we're going to sit down with our elective teachers and, hey, what does it look like for a 6th, 7th, and 8th grader? And how do we keep this? Because one of the problems, take away this whole thing, one of the other concerns we've had is one year we may have an art class, we may have, I'll just use Butler for instance, one year we have an FTE of 2.0, so 2 staff members. The next year we may have 1.5. And then the next year we might be back up at 2.2. It's like a roller coaster every single year. Is one of the things that we want to try to focus on too, is how do we can get sustainability, because some of those, there's some courses where it's very hard to staff. And sometimes we have, and we don't want, like I mentioned before, we don't want to lose staff members. So it's really about how do we sustain and keep it more of a level playing field through our keep that sustainability all from year to year to year as well. And also, and that balance is also giving students choice.
Part of that flexibility too comes into how those minutes are allocated. So going to that true mid-level, if we reduce the amount of transition time that needs to be done, we're buying back instructional minutes to put into other areas. If we're looking at different structures within a scheduling model of blocks and skinnies, as they may be called, kids are still having those opportunities and those experiences within those classrooms. So it's how you're utilizing minutes to not only meet needs but provide opportunities. And within that team structure, we currently are transitioning students 7 times, 21 to 27 minutes a day of transitions. Within a team structure, there are opportunities to not take that away, so to speak, but reallocate how that is used. So then that can go back into instructional time to increase a core area and not take away something. So it's not adding staff, it's not reducing staff, it's reallocating the usage of staff and looking at 2 interventions taking place, enrichments taking place. Going back to years ago, learning centers, the misnomer of what a learning center is could be really a structured intervention, which is providing a kid an extra opportunity or an enrichment opportunity to give kids that, but every student having that is how that time is allocated. And I know we have staff who are very talented in multiple certifications, who could be a world language teacher and a reading license teacher who can do both things if they're willing and wanting to do so. So it's not saying you're going to take something away without providing a quality piece. It's how do we utilize those minutes to do so. And within our current structure, we have days that other things are being offered in the instructional day of social emotional learning, which has been a huge hit, ECP, instructional time for academic and career planning, and going back to a mid-level model, those things could be incorporated within our core areas to make the learning transferable in real life, and then that buys us back time as well. So it's how do we utilize those minutes within our current structure is not feasible, so creating a different structure to utilize those minutes to the maximum opportunity.
Mr. Como.
Technically, can a high school student take Spanish or French 1 as a freshman? Or do we not offer that beginning in high school? Or do you have to have a language in middle school in order to continue at the high school level? I understand the advantage starting in middle school, but technically, can a student say, I want to start speaking Spanish or start speaking French, take those classes their freshman year?
Speaking from a parent with a student who now is a recent graduate in the university, looking at finishing off Spanish 4 and going to French 1 as a senior was an option. So it was an option to take a entry-level course at a different grade level.
I just wanted to know if it was a possibility or not. I understand the advantage of starting in middle school.
In that opportunity, I envision that opportunity will still be available for students. I don't see that not being an opportunity.
That's what I heard, that your conversations are going to cover that and see how that plays out.
So what I want, what I want to see when you come back for approval is how those opportunities are going to be there, right? Because I'm hearing from Rob that, and I trust Rob a lot, that there's going to be an efficiency here where we won't be cutting these opportunities. But yet I'm kind of hearing from everybody else is that, they might get cut.
There's going to need to be choice, but those opportunities to be there.
Okay, so when we come back to approve this plan, and I know this board, they'll approve any plan you put in front of them for the most part, but I would like to see that we're preserving the richness and hopefully growing the richness and not just focused on a literacy test for 1 year in 8th grade. And I'm challenging the administration, and I'll tie it up this way. My dad probably set 1,000 posts, and I probably set one to his 1,000. But he always taught me that you don't have a solid post unless you set the foundation first, right? You can pound on that post at the top all day long, and it'll still be loose if you don't tamp down the foundation. So when you guys come in here and you say, geez, I'm so stressed because we're not getting results, it's not your fault. We got a foundation we have to build for you. If you really want to get better results, we need to send you a better starting point, and then we get better all the way through. So to focus on 8th grade is like stepping on the top of the ground once the post is loose at the bottom. It's not going to do it, right? So I appreciate that we're trying, and I appreciate the ideas that are coming up here, but it goes much deeper than this, and we have a lot more work to do.
Anything else, Ms. Ratty?
Sorry to drag this on. I am still taking it all in. Was it Jamie? Forgive me, sir.
Yes.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add? I'd like to hear from you. I'm sorry.
I was just really Rob's arm candy for the day.
Dedicated time to sit here. I'd like to at least hear your voice.
Sure. Speaking to Mr. O'Brien, and he had discussed the richness of the middle level experience, and the one thing that just to help define that, the biggest part of this is relationship building, and the relationship building is going to increase scores across the board. And currently, within a junior high-ish kind of modified model, that's not really that possible. But when you see a common group of teachers talking to and with and about a common group of students, the relationship building builds to a different level than we can currently, or we are able to do today. So that's really the biggest part. It was, as the many years that I've been at Central, now Les Paul, the best years were within that middle level concept. It worked really well.
Meg?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. Just again, to clarify, make sure I'm understanding this. So these changes really, compared to what's currently established, would affect the 8th grade levels, because the 6th and 7th grade, if I'm understanding, are already experiencing this. Okay, got that. And all of this talk still wouldn't affect the programs of Flight or Quest or anything like that, because they're in their own world. Okay. And I'm going to agree with my colleagues here that I don't fully buy the data either, that 1 year of testing. So I appreciate all of the dialogue back and forth, all of the audience, all of you all trying to find this magic solution. So just thank you for your time, and gives me more food for thought.
Anything else?
Just because, right? I just
So I don't have to be last.
yeah. I just want to especially thank our administrators and really all teachers that were here this morning. I just want to echo Dan Keyser's sentiments by saying that we all are working very hard towards the same thing. So as I sit here and listen and observe and take a lot of notes, I think this conversation was highly enriching for the board in general, and I think this will continue to move our goals forward in a positive way. So I see a lot of byproducts of this. So thank you very much. That will just continue to help our organization get better. So thank you.
That's good. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Sarah, thank you for coming. Appreciate it. Hey, Dan.
Our last discussion item this evening is recent ACT data presented by Amy Rebel, District Data Coordinator. Welcome, Amy.
So my computer has decided that it does not want to project. So Stacy, if you could, I reset it a couple of times in the last hour, but it's had enough. So Stacy's going to help me out, I think, by projecting. There we go. And I will give you just a brief overview of our 11th grade ACT scores. If you want to go ahead and go to the second slide. There we go. So just as a review, we administer the ACT as part of the state assessment plan to all of our 11th graders, and that happens in last year, or this year it happened in February. This next year it will happen in March. But all 11th graders participate in that assessment, except for about 1% of our population who, because of significant cognitive disabilities, participate in something called the Dynamic Learning Maps, or DLM. So, as you probably know, our 11th graders and any of our high school students can also self-select to participate in an ACT administration at another time. Usually it's a Saturday. So those results are not included in what we're going to look at tonight. So 11th graders as a part of the ACT are tested in English, reading, writing, math, and science. And they receive a score between 1 and 36 for each of those 5 areas, with the exception of writing, which is on a slightly different scale. And students also receive an ELA score, which includes English, writing, and reading, and then a STEM score, which includes math and science. And so they receive a whole number score for each of those areas. And then they receive a composite score, which is the whole number average of English, math, reading, and science. And so tonight I'm going to share with you the most recent administration results in English, math, reading, science, writing, and then our composite score. Couple other notes. These results do not include the students who took the DLM, and I am also not sharing results from East tonight because they had a small number of students participate, and in order to protect student privacy, we wouldn't share those results just because it is a small number of students. So just a reminder about the district goals related to the 11th grade or junior ACT for 18-19. Our goal was to have a composite ACT score as a district, 1 point above the state's ACT composite average. So that was our goal. Okay. Here are our math results for this year. At the top of the chart on the left, you'll see the state average, which was 19.6. And then each of our schools listed in order by average score. And in parentheses next to the school name, I have listed the number of students who participated. So you can see that our Engineering Academy had an average score of 25.4. Our Academy of Health Professions had an average of 21.7. West had an average of 20.5. North was at 19.2. eAchieve had an average of 18. South had an average of 17.8. for an overall district average in math of 19.4. In English, we had a state average of 18.5. And again, the scores are listed there by school, with Engineering Academy had an average score of 24.8. West was at 21.2. Health professions were at 20.9. E achieved 19.3. North 18.4. South 16.6. My old eyes at this hour are struggling. There we go. And then district average of 19.2. That was for English. Reading, we had a state average of 20.2. Engineering was at 26.7. Health professions 22.7. West at 22.6. E achieved 20.7. North 20.7. South 18.4. And a district average of 21.1. Science, our state average this year was 20.1. Engineering was at 25.7. West was 21.9. Health professions 21.6. North 20.3. E achieved 19.7. South 18.3. And a district average of 20.5. Writing is scored on a 12-point scale, so it's a little bit different. We had a state average of 6.3 on that 12-point scale. Health professions had an average score of 7.3. The Engineering Academy was at 7.2. West had an average of 6.8. North was at 6.3. E Achieve at 6.2. South at 5.9, and our district average was 6.4. And then our composite results. The state composite average was 19.7. The Engineering Academy had a composite of 25.8. Health Professions was at 21.8. West was at 21.7. North was at 19.8. E achieved 19.6. South 17.9, which gave us a district average of 20.2, or 0.5 above the state average. So obviously everything that we talk about and all of the instruction that happens goes into developing the skills that eventually result in what we see on a state assessment like this. But a couple of things I just wanted to point out that we have done around these data points. We had some pretty intense principal data delves and action planning sessions around both ACT and ACT Aspire. We don't talk here very often about ACT Aspire, but that is the assessment that our 9th and 10th graders take in the spring, which gives us another measure that shows potential progress on an ACT later on as 11th graders. So we spent some time as principals this year really digging into ACT Aspire at a level deeper than we had previously, and schools came together with some action planning around those scores that will impact students as they move on through the grades.
How long have we been doing ACT Aspire?
I believe this is the 5th year, might just be the 4th year. It's around the same. There were other versions of it in previous years. There was something called Plan and Explore that was done previously. So ACT Aspire, this might be year 4.
9th and 10th grade, you said?
Correct. Yes. And one thing that's different about ACT Aspire versus ACT is ACT Aspire is online. So where ACT is still a paper pencil assessment. So, again, this spring we did our ACT practice test for our sophomores. So on the ACT test day for 11th graders, our sophomores also came in and took that ACT practice test, also a paper pencil test, to get that experience in what the ACT would look like. And then our schools were able to use that data to help students understand what their score was, and we get an item analysis so students can see which questions they missed, and teachers can see patterns in how the students responded to particular questions. We also continue to have our method test prep available to students. That's embedded in that Career Cruising or Zello that our students have access to. So students can participate in that test prep, and I believe schools can also monitor student participation in that. Of course, as you know, our school SAIL goals continue to focus on increasing student achievement, and our AVID implementation continues to grow. So those are all pieces that continue to impact these scores and student performance. All right, that was a very quick overview.
Mr. Como.
I know in the past and probably still in the present, there are students who don't take these tests very seriously and they don't really participate. Do we have a sense of how that has kind of, I think we've tried to take some actions to improve on that. Could you go through where we've been and what we're trying to do on that?
So we have taken a look at that, and individual schools take a look at that. They've had discussions with individual students. I know there have been discussions about incentives. There were no specific incentives that were provided for students this past year. More so conversation around why this is important and how this can benefit you later. Tried to really increase participation and building up lots of talking around in the school to help students understand this is important. You want this score, you may need it later on, all sorts of things. So I think back particularly last spring to some things happening at South to get students to see the importance and to want to be there because everybody else was going to be there and we're gonna do this together. And so I have heard participation increasing. We have seen that. Do we still have a pocket of students who are probably not putting forth their best effort, and we need to continue to work on that? Absolutely.
Do we have a sense of, and I don't know if you really need to share that data here, but I mean, it would be nice to have some sort of sense of, is this a little problem, a medium-sized problem, big problem?
I recently looked at the ACT data that goes back 10 years, and it was 5 years ago, it became ACT for all.
Yep.
Prior to that time, as a district, we averaged about 22 to 22.5 on the ACT. So that was when the kids who were college-bound were taking the test. In the years since, we've averaged between 20.1 as a district score and 20.5. So the impact overall on our composite has gone down approximately 2 points by testing an additional 34% of the class. And that does include kids who perhaps at one time weren't college bound and are now required to take the test. It requires kids who show up and maybe put their name on it and then do a little design. That all of that then factors into, it's about a 2-point impact on us, which has more or less been a consistent impact across many school districts in the state. The ACT was originally designed as a college entrance exam,
right,
and nothing more than that.
Right. So the issue still exists and we're trying to
Correct.
Continue to work on it. Okay. Fair enough. I didn't think it went away, so.
That's Ronnie.
Thank you. You made mention that the 9th and 10th grade was electronic, and then the 11th and 12th.
11th grade.
11th grade is paper and pencil. Does that make a difference?
You know, there are so many factors that go into that is hard to pinpoint as, you know, a particular factor. I can say that ACT is doing more offerings around offering an electronic option nationwide in the coming years. So that's something that they are moving to. So I think for those of our students who are used to more digital, you know, that's a preference, whether that's a pinpoint to a lower score for students who have to do paper pencil. I think we'll see that in the coming years as we have more students taking, we'll see whether or not that's the case when we have more students taking the online option. For the present time, the state administration will continue to be paper pencil. So that's a decision that the state makes for us. They have asked for feedback over time, but I think when you're looking at testing a large number of students, not every district has the capability to do that electronically, so that is a factor.
Mr. Baumgart.
In one of the charts, you talked about the things you can take in the 9th and 10th grade.
The ACT Aspire.
Can you look at the data from that, not on the kids level, but on the district level, to see if there's holes that we are?
Yes, it'll tell us whether students are on track, whether they are in need of support, and so we can see those patterns.
So you
in
can
our
find out if there's a gap in the math program that we are presenting
Yeah.
to our kids.
And that's part of what we spent time on digging in and helping principals see those pieces as we went through that data delve. So, and I don't think we had used, I mean, that was just a piece. We do a lot around data, and we've done an increasing amount around data for sure in the last few years. That was a piece that we hadn't fully tapped into. So, and we'll continue to, build our data literacy around that. But I think that was a positive step that helped us see those holes, potential holes, a little bit better.
Is there a question on the ACT that asks whether or not the student is college bound?
There is an opportunity for a survey for students they fill out all sorts of, or have the opportunity to fill out all sorts of information. We don't specifically get that response back in that way.
The reason why I was asking is I was just wondering if there would be a way to separate out the ACT scores for the college bound versus the non-college bound. It might be interesting to see that difference and see if there is that. I mean, on average, it was a 2-point spread, but we might want to track those groups differently, possibly.
Yeah.
I think
the state doesn't give us that data in that way, but for that administration, I'd have to dig deeper into that. But yeah.
It's a good question, Mr. Como, because
Definitely.
I sit here and think about our senior exit data that says our trend data shows about 60% of our students over 5 years are going to college. So the other 40% are not. So if you use that as a determiner, so it's a good question.
When our kids graduate from South, let's just take the engineering and the health professionals. Do they graduate from the Health Professional Academy, or do they graduate from South?
Both. I mean, both. They have. We at the South ceremony, which I was at. They present their own graduation. I mean, they're there as a South diploma with like a academy. I don't know how it's listed on the diploma. I don't have anybody here from South,
High School,
but
and then
it'll
noted
say
on
like
the diploma that Academy of Health Professionals
or WAP
yes.
on the bottom. Yep.
But data-wise,
but they're South kids then.
Correct.
Really.
Yeah.
So even though we like to have that separate segregation of health and engineering, it seems to me that when you report South, you should report the composite of those three instead of just leaving South hanging out there all by itself, because it's not really fair to South.
Well, they are separate schools. They are reported for accountability. For when I get the test results back, I get them as 3 separate schools. But I can tell you that had they been put all 3 together, the composite would have been 19.6.
So
yeah.
there's nothing wrong with us displaying for our own purposes those numbers, because when you put that up there, it doesn't really tell us how they're doing as a overall student body population. And we know that.
Right.
That skews the numbers.
Right, and
that makes South not look as good as the other schools when it really has, you can say in some ways it has more to offer than the other
And
schools.
students in those specialty programs are taking their core, English courses at South, with South teachers. They're all the same teachers. So yes, I did write that down. Thank you for reminding me of that. When we report out for accountability purposes, though, they are 3 separate schools. So
I understand that, but for what we show to the board and internally, we should be giving South more credit than what we're giving them.
Amy, students, juniors can take that ACT test prior to February, March. I know that really is an advantage to a lot of kids that do that. How much does the district promote students taking advantage of that opportunity?
So that happens mostly at the school level with the counselors promoting. So that's not something I'm directly involved in, but I know they do promote it, and I know that we have students who take it multiple times, starting, and not as many freshmen, but many sophomores take it. So the junior administration is not always their first experience.
Has to be a huge advantage.
Yes, I think
for most students.
ACT has shown when you take the test multiple times, you do tend to
prior to when it
increase your
really
score.
counts.
Mhm.
Yep.
Definitely.
Counts your last time, not your best time, right?
We do get a report We do get a report for our graduates that shows us how they did on the last ACT that they took. For this purpose, we're looking at everybody the same day. So it just is that day that they took it back in February of this past year. And that's what we're looking at for accountability purposes, which is what I'm here to share tonight. So, yeah.
And then I heard too, there were changes coming down where students won't have to retake the whole test, but just subsegments of the test.
Yes, last month the ACT did announce that they will allow students to take an electronic version of just a subsection that they would like to retest. And
the whole test.
yeah, so there are more changes coming in future years for ACT. No word yet on how, if in any way, that will impact our state administration. So we'll still have this piece, looks like for the foreseeable future will be the same as it has been this year. But if there are changes, we'll let you know.
Sounds good. Anything else for Amy? Okay.
All right, thank you.
We are now into other business. Any recommendations for future committee meetings from any committee members? Mr. O'Brien.
No rush, but we have this, as we get into this issue of the relocation of that sixth grade, if that proceeds, because there was a preliminary question at the last board meeting that was presented to all the board members. And for the most part, I think a number of board members said, we understand. But it's a teaching and learning issue as to what kind of environment are those children going to be presented for that 1 year that they're sixth graders over in Blair. I mean, obviously Blair's not set up for today for that group of students. So that we'll have to have that covered in T&L at some point, I'm sure.
It is on the F&F agenda for the November meeting, and I believe there's the intention of bringing that forward then to the whole board from the F&F.
So what I'm saying though is that the learning aspect of it needs to be covered, should be covered over in this committee. Presented. We don't need to approve it, but information or something.
Okay.
Because I've had people ask me about that. You guys were so nonchalant about talking about us, and yet none of this is really being thought of.
Yes, Mr.
One question. It was briefly discussed in the schedule, the eighth grade or the middle school schedule conversation, and that was the idea of transition from fifth to sixth and eighth to ninth. And there's, from an administrator, and I know from our principals who are going to be addressing this at the elementary level and at the middle school level, I think we either may need to have that discussed either at the teaching and learning committee as a discussion item so that we can get some perspectives from the committee members on what that transition is, what you perceive as that transition, what that means to you, or in a board work session where we can talk about it if it is a priority. Because I've heard principals say it's my job to make sure that at the end of, say, fifth grade in an elementary level, I have prepared the best possible fifth grader that is achieving at the highest possible standard that we can get them in the fifth grade level. And I've heard the same thing from middle school principals say, my job is to make sure that I have the best prepared eighth grader, because that is all that we know. That's all that we have control over. There's that adage, act your age. Well, it's very difficult to act your age because you've never lived your age before. It's really easy to act the year before because you've lived it, you have that experience. When we start looking at this concept of that transition, we administratively need to understand what those points of concern are. Is it that the kids are immature, that they don't understand, that there's behavior issues, that there's a lack of preparedness? And if that's the case, then does that then spill into a bigger conversation around some of the topics that you mentioned tonight? Is it grading? Is it a framework? Whatever it might be. Because again, we have middle school teachers who teach at the middle school level. They teach middle school kids who have been at those schools for 3 years. They can prepare a middle schooler, but it's very difficult to forecast forward as to what does that high school kid need to look like, because that eighth grade group, using them as an example, is at the top of the pecking order at the middle school. They go a year forward based off of middle school behavior into a high school where they're now at the bottom of the social ladder because they are freshmen in high school. And so we would need some direction as to what that means so that we can help support our work in those efforts, to what you guys have as a goal.
Mr. Baumgart.
When we get through the discussions on this, one of the issues what board members think the transition is, but what the incoming principal is getting, because the complaints would come from the incoming principal, I'm getting kids out of 5th grade that aren't ready. Same thing with the high school. So it really is, what are the incoming principals expecting? And what of that are we missing?
And so the only thing that I'd add to that, and we can get into it more without debating this topic, I've worked in special education now for nearly 20 years. And as part of special ed, we always talk about transition. And I've worked with post-secondary groups that say your high school kids aren't prepared. I've worked with high school groups that say your middle school kids aren't prepared. I've worked with middle schools who say the elementary aren't sending us prepared kids. I've worked with elementary staff who say the birth to 3 program isn't doing a very good job. And I've talked to birth to 3 staff and saying the kids we're getting are more and more severe. So I do think that there's a propensity to always look down at the level below you and say they're not as prepared.
It's probably true.
Right. So I think that that's a worthy discussion in some format as an agendized item.
Before long, you'll be blaming their great-grandparents.
Generations ago,
And as a minimum, Dr. Cook, just to know what currently exists or what's currently happening in those transitions, which I don't think I'm aware of as much as maybe I should be.
I think this was raised at the board level as a question. How are we doing? We just, as a board, didn't know how we were doing in the transition.
Or what we're doing.
We heard maybe some snippets from some parents or from some principals or whatever that kind of brought this up. And then we just asked the question, how are we doing? And I don't even know if we knew how to measure that.
Right.
No, we don't.
So, and that's
where
why
I
it
think
might
the
be a good
principals
discussion. But just so you know, I mean, it was really brought up as more of a, how are we doing?
And I do believe it's a worthwhile conversation.
As opposed to, we need to be doing this.
Right.
And why aren't you guys doing this?
And are there things
There's
that
a
could be
difference.
done to help students? Bottom line.
I'm not sure exactly what every board member's perception is of what they're asking in that regard is, but I will say, we have different types of programs throughout the district that prepare children in a different way, okay? And I've heard concerns from children that go through that program versus children who go through the other programs that they're not prepared in the same way to enter into the 9th grade. Give it as an example. I agree with everything you said, Mr. Cook, about transitions and they all point down the stream. That's understandable. But if our principals or teachers are telling us there's a certain group of kids that are routinely coming out of a certain area and they're not as ready for being here as other groups of kids that are coming out from across the district, then maybe there's something we need to look at there.
Absolutely.
Okay? And that's coming from teachers. Principals never tell you because they don't really acknowledge, nobody wants to point upstream or point fingers, but it's coming from educators, coming from parents that there's a potential problem. Okay? That's what we're hearing. Doesn't mean it's true. That's what we're hearing. And one I have. But
anything else? Okay. That's going to conclude our meeting this evening. The next Teaching and Learning Committee meeting will be Tuesday, December 3rd. I also want to extend a special thank you for our dedicated administrators and staff that stayed with us throughout this meeting, as well as any residents that were here. Thank you very much to each and every one of you. Have a good evening.